This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, John Tucker in for Lisa Mateo. How did that happen?
I don't know.
John
bad
Tucker
trade.
in for Lisa. It's a bad trade.
It's a bad trade.
It's a suspect to say.
Wait till I leave the room before you
Are
insult
you
me?
with us all week, John? I mean, are you here?
Yes, Lisa
Right
will
up
be
till
back,
Friday?
I guess, Tuesday.
Yeah, and then you're off for the next month. That's good. Okay. Well, John Tucker with us here to give perspective. Really interesting screen. And if you look at the Bloomberg Professional Service, folks, equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, forget about Nvidia. Paul, the bond market is speaking volumes. I got a 385.
Yep.
2-year, way under 4%, a 381 10-year. I mean, I'm not talking 30-year bond, 3.99% there, but I'm starting to frame it.
Exactly. We got that 30-year at 4.1%. Tom, that yield curve, when you look at the 2s and 10s, is almost
4 basis points
uninverted here, and I'm not sure
You
what
had
that means.
CFA level 4,
Exactly.
teen tweens.
I think that's important, so we'll keep an eye on that. But we got futures kind of mixed here today, Tom, and everybody's, again, from a stock market perspective, focused on Nvidia.
Focused
and
on
tech
Nvidia.
trade.
We'll talk about
Yep.
it. We'll give you some value add there from the Bloomberg intelligence people. They've done a great job. Mandeep was lights out. Where were you yesterday?
I was out there at the National Tennis Center out in Queens.
You and what? 10,000 people?
40,000 people, 50,000 people packed to the gills. But I will tell you, they do a great job getting
Well,
everybody
we'll
around.
talk
You go
about it.
early in the tournament, there's so many different matches on all the outer courts that a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
all deductible, doing a front
Exactly.
service for Carol Masser and Tim Stanovic. They'll be out there Thursday and Friday, 3 p.m. across Bloomberg. Looking forward to it. It's a real. We'll give you some color on it through the day. It's either that or talk about the Detroit Tigers, which we can only do so much of. We are on YouTube from our wonderful studios here. You subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast out of YouTube. I had a blowout meeting on it. You were out having
did.
fun.
Sure.
They come in, they walk in the room and they got their handlers. There's like 12 people in the room talking to me. Everybody's got, binders, like Mitt Romney said,
Right.
binders full of this and that. And the answer is we are humbled by the YouTube sign up, the subscriptions to Bloomberg Podcast out on YouTube, and also the international feel of it. We never expected that. Today we say good morning. Good evening, I should say, Melbourne, Australia. Good evening in Melbourne, Australia, listening to Paul Sweeney and yours truly. From the Interactive Broker Studios of Bloomberg Business Flash, John Tucker.
All right, futures little changed as the major averages hover around records. Yeah, the Dow Jones Industrial Average coming off another record close yesterday, and most active, do I even have to say it? Shares of Nvidia 0.3% higher right now. Nordstrom shares up to close to 8% pre-market, improving their comparable sales forecast for the year. Foot Locker out with earnings this morning, big beat for comparable second quarter sales. Bitcoin posting its biggest drop since early August. Crypto-linked stocks, they're falling as a result. Dow Jones Industrial Average, the futures right now, 9 points lower. S&P E-mini futures unchanged. And the NASDAQ futures right now unchanged. Let's look at crude oil. Brent crude down 1.8%, 78.11. NYMEX crude is at 73.98. That's down about 2%. A 2-year yield, 3.85. The 10-year right now, 3.81. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. We start strong. Marilyn Watson is at BlackRock.
Yep.
She got a fancy title. She demanded this title when she came over from J.P. Morgan. Global Fundamental Fixed Income Strategy. Here's what you need to know. Tour duty at her Bank of England and also a parchment from the University of Cambridge. Marilyn, I'm dying to talk to you about what I believe is a reset after the Powell speech. When I look at full faith and credit yields today, it just looks like a massive, dare I say, permanent reset to lower yields. Do you buy that idea?
Well, I certainly agree that we have seen a big reset in terms of the pricing, obviously for treasuries, but for fixed income as well. When you look at the roller coaster that fixed income yields have been on, prices have been on this year, from pricing at the beginning of the year to then a lot of cuts, then at one point even pricing a further hike. And now I do think, finally, after Powell's speech at Jackson Hole, then the scene is definitely, set for the Fed to start cutting rates in September. I think when you look at yields, when you look at also all-in rates, I do still think in this environment, while we do think obviously the Fed will cut in September and they will continue to cut perhaps for the next few meetings. And Powell made it very clear. He said that the direction of travel is that rates will be going down. When you look at the all-in yields that you can also get in credit and elsewhere, then they're still very, very attractive. I think particularly when you look at an economy that is still pretty robust. When you look at, obviously, the labor market is softening and the Fed has sort of pivoted now from focusing on prices to focusing on the labor market and the overall growth of the economy. It is softening, but the US economy is still, at this point in time, still doing pretty well. So I think we have seen a big shift. We've seen a shift towards seeing lower rates commencing next month. But I do still think that now we can continue to see very attractive yields in fixed income.
Marilyn, what do you expect from our European friends? The ECB and the Bank of England have already begun cutting rates, and will they take a little bit more confidence to continue that trend, given that we've heard Fed Chairman Jay Powell say that the U.S. Fed is ready to start cutting rates?
Yeah, that's right. So they both already began to cut rates. Obviously, the Bank of England cut them at the beginning of this month, the ECB a little bit before that. And we think that they're going to continue to cut rates, but probably in a little bit more of a gradual fashion, probably about once a quarter. So we do think in September that the ECB will cut rates again. Obviously, at the end of this week, we do get the flash HICP, the inflation data coming out of the Eurozone. We think it's going to keep them on track to cut rates again in September. In terms of the Bank of England, we heard from Governor Andrew Bailey also at Jackson Hole, and he was also very clear that the direction of travel is that rates will probably go lower. But again, he's in no hurry, and we do think that it will probably also around once a quarter. So we expect that the Bank of England may cut rates again in November. I think when you look at the starting point, as you say, both the ECB and the Bank of England already started their easing cycle. The Fed, I think, has a little bit of catch up to do. It's obviously a bit later than them. And so we do think the Fed may be a little bit more aggressive in terms of the next few cuts, whereas the Bank of England, the ECB will be more gradual. And also their economies are in a different place to the US as well.
All right, Marilyn, so you're at BlackRock. You guys are everywhere. Given that backdrop of global rate declines, where do you guys see value these days?
Yeah, so when you look at government bonds, first of all, then we still like some Spanish duration. We're also long UK duration, a little bit in the US. And then we're short duration in Japan because, we do think that, the Bank of Japan is actually going to continue to hike rates this year. But we do like, at the front end of the curve, we do like attractive names in investment grade credit. In Europe, in the Eurozone, for example, we still think that you can find some very attractive all-in yields and some very attractive valuations, particularly when you then hedge that back into the dollar. We think that's pretty attractive in many cases. We continue to like some securitized assets, some very liquid, very cash generative names as well, where we think, you get decent yield, a decent all-in carry, but you also do have, I think, a lot of flexibility. And where we are now, we want to make sure that we really understand on a risk-adjusted level.
Right.
We also do like areas of emerging markets. For example, we're long Mexico still too.
Marilyn, we got to be quick here, but this is too important. Yeah. I just put on Twitter my Marilyn Watson chart of the day. I'm going to discuss it, Marilyn. This is an adult chart. It's Global Wall Street Talk, folks. Stay with me. Marilyn, I went back to Paul Volcker, and I looked at the Bloomberg Corporate Total Return Series, not full faith and credit. And I took the regression from 1990 out to the present day. The bond debacle that you and BlackRock have lived was a 3 standard deviation move. Really elegant. The fact is, with a Powell speech, I'm back to a -2 standard deviations. Can you envision price up, yield down, where we could get back to 20 and 30-year log trend on the price of bonds?
So I think when you look at the corporate market, I mean, we certainly could expect to see yields come a little bit down from here. I certainly think that's possible. I think also when you look at the overall economy, when you look at what is being priced in terms of the sheer number of cuts, first of all, by the Fed, the market's actually pricing in a lot of pretty negative news that we don't necessarily see coming through next year. We do think the labor market will continue to soften. We do think activity will continue to soften. But we don't see a strong catalyst certainly for any sort of sharp recession or anything like that.
Right.
So when you look at the overall backdrop in terms of corporates, when you look at particularly in the US as well, we do continue to see a pretty strong backdrop in terms of economic activity, one that is slowing. But again, we do think yields will come down.
Okay.
We do think that prices, however, will remain pretty attractive.
This is a clinic. Marilyn Watson, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it with BlackRock. I'm going to put that chart out with explanation on Twitter and on LinkedIn. That's what we do at Bloomberg Surveillance. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul John, the U.S. Special Counsel investigating Donald Trump for election interference, is pressing ahead with his case. Bloomberg's Nancy Lyons with the latest.
Special Counsel Jack Smith is not giving up on his prosecution of Donald Trump, even though he faced a setback this summer before the Supreme Court. He's filed an updated indictment following the court's ruling that Trump was at least partially immune from prosecution related to his official acts as president. The new indictment removes allegations related to Trump's communications with government officials at the Department of Justice during his presidency. But it keeps intact the same 4 charges against Trump, which include accusations of conspiring to overturn election results. In Washington, Nancy Lyons, Bloomberg Radio.
Vice President Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will embark on a campaign bus tour of Savannah, Georgia today. Meanwhile, Harris and Walz have agreed to do their first interview since the vice president became a candidate. He will be on CNN tomorrow night. Republican vice presidential candidate and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance was out on the campaign trail yesterday in Michigan. At a rally in Big Rapids, Vance outlined a top priority for him and his boss, Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris wants to open the border. On day one, Donald Trump is going to close the southern border, and his message to every illegal immigrant is pack your bags because you're going home.
As a heat wave stretched into a second day this week, residents in more than a half a dozen states are looking for ways to beat the heat amid hot temperatures approaching triple digits. The National Weather Service has issued excessive heat warnings and advisories in large patches of Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg Tom, Paul John.
What was the best part of the U.S. Open, Paul? You missed Damian Sassower and Michael Barr Rotisserie League NFL.
Exactly.
You are so lucky. They actually thought people cared.
Yeah, exactly.
It was extraordinary.
A lot of people do, though, Tom. A lot of people are into that kind of stuff.
Michael Barr, 20 seconds, wild card. Baltimore Orioles, Cleveland Guardians, Minnesota Twins, Red Sox, and then the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah,
They're
on a roll.
in the running, on a roll.
Yes, we are. We are.
And you have Scooball.
Yeah. We are over the 500 mark.
Yes.
And only one team is really out of play, Chicago White Sox.
For the first time since Nixon was president. Thank you for that review, Michael Barr. Futures flat this morning. Lots going on today again. Ed Ludlow, 6 o'clock hour tonight on Nvidia. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom. This Bloomberg Business Flash. More retail earnings this morning. Let's go right to Kohl's big takeaways so far. Kohl's cutting its net sales forecast for the full year. But the company also says it's committed to returning capital to shareholders through the dividend and further strengthening the balance sheet. As a result of that, those shares up over 3% in the pre-market. Also, results from Foot Locker this morning. Sales surpassing analyst expectations, snapping 5 consecutive quarters of negative comparable sales. Still, management then tweaked lower the gross margin range. So shares there down over 8%. U.S. mortgage rates falling again to the lowest level since April of 2023. The contract rate on a 30-year fixed easing for a fourth week to 6.44%. That is the longest stretch of declines this year. Right now, we have Dow E-mini futures unchanged. S&P futures also unchanged. The NASDAQ futures are down just 1 point. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker at your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thank you, John Tucker. This is a real important conversation. We've had a huge response for Audrey Childe-Freeman, not only for the reality she would not swim in the River Seine as her France did a spectacular Olympics, but her really hardball linking and foreign exchange strategy into our economics and into our political economics. Audrey Childe-Freeman from Queen Victoria Street in London. Audrey, I got an email when somebody heard you were on. Did your parents take off all the month of August in France? Did you really do that when you were a kid?
Not really, but I have to say that August tends to be quite light in terms of workload.
Quite light.
And by the way, not just in France, in most of Europe, I would say.
We would say we are so jealous of that, Audrey. Speaking of Europe, the euro is a point here. We've got a number of guests with certitude looking for euro weakness. Not so much what's your call on euro, but frame out how euro gets from 112, dare I say 115, to a weaker 105. How does that happen?
Oh, well, for that to happen, I kind of feel that it would have to be dollar strength driven. So you'd have to kind of question the whole narrative that we've had in place in the past few weeks, where the US economy is slowing down, disinflation is well in place, and the Fed is telling us that they're cutting rates. So, I think, because euro upside was very much driven by the Fed narrative, I also kind of feel that euro dollar downside would have to be driven by the same narrative, reversing. And I just can't see that happening for now. Now, I also acknowledge the fact that, the domestic news flow in Europe hasn't really been that great at all in the past few weeks, but it hasn't been a driver. So it hasn't really been influencing where euro dollar is trading. And I think, from a euro perspective, we actually expect some slight improvement in the macro news flow in the second half of the year. And that's probably good enough for as long as the US narrative holds. For our euro-dollar view to be validated and for us to get into this range we've been waiting all year, 112 to 115.
Audrey, how about the Japanese yen here? I'm looking at it sitting here at 144.39. Am I in a range right now with this yen, or is there still maybe some more strength here for this yen?
I think there is more strength to come, but I kind of think, and we wrote about that in a note on the terminal, that I think the next move is going to be a slide as opposed to a slump, in a way that, what took us from 160 to 144 is the monetary policy dynamic divergences between the Fed and the BOJ. And we've talked about it, and it's arguably in the price now. But it's still valid. It's something that I think will stay with us into year end and into early next year. But positioning, the big positioning unwind has arguably taken place already. So that's why I kind of feel that, we won't see that exacerbated price action that we've seen in the summer, in the past few weeks.
Brett Sutzer's out in the Financial Times looking at intervention in large economies. Have we proven with Bank of Japan intervention that unilateral intervention is efficacious? Or are you going to go all Dornbush on me and say you can't do it unless everybody's in the same pool?
Well, that's a very good point, a very good question. You can't do it unless everybody is on the same side, i.e. if you get other central banks on your side, and or if there is already a move in your direction in the market. And that's kind of what we saw with dollar yen, because dollar yen, earlier in the summer was kind of, diverging from the yield differential between the dollar and the BOJ. So the yield differential was already moving lower. And for quite a few weeks, dollar yen was kind of sticky, not going anywhere. And then we had the catch up. And the BOJ, kind of intervened exactly at the right time. If you look at the timing, in the moves that we saw in the following weeks.
Yeah, but we're going to go to Win Thin here next, folks, and we're going to focus with Dr. Thin on the Pacific Rim, China, and all. But Audrey, I mean, the fact is I'm observing inflation in Japan. So the math doesn't work for me. Do you find the theory of Japanese monetary system just completely flawed?
I don't think so. I kind of feel that it was a very difficult predicament and a big challenge for the BOJ to come out of the ultra-loose monetary policy environment that we've had for decades without creating a meltdown, potentially a meltdown in the bond market that could have had impact on the global financial markets. So from that perspective, I think they've been quite moderate and very moderate, and you could argue behind the curve, but it hasn't really created much damage in terms of financial market stability, and that's very important.
Audrey, thank you so much. Audrey Childe-Freeman with us, publishing. Look for it on the terminal at Bloomberg Intelligence. Can't say enough about the work from London this morning. Paul and I are both agree that we need to do Nvidia differently today. We're really going to try to do that. Paul, one of the scope and scales that I use is where was a company before the pandemic and where are they now?
Right.
Nvidia, before the pandemic, they had make it $12 billion of revenue.
Yep.
They now have 60. There's no other company in our universe like that.
No, and the earnings have kept right up with that revenue growth, Tom. So here's a company that's just extraordinary in terms of growth, and in terms of the valuation, I mean, this is a company that looks like it's earning its way into its multiple, on a trailing 12-month basis, a 75 PE, 1 year forward, 47, 2 years forward, 30. I mean, there's a company earning its way into its multiple. The stock's up 160% year to date with a $3.2 trillion market cap.
I was talking to our financial analyst, John Tucker, today about this. Can you use a traditional analysis on Nvidia at Bloomberg Intelligence? Can you have a 7-year terminal value?
I'm not sure I'd go 7 years. My models, we'd always go 5 and then kind of discount it back here. But I mean, again, you look at the revenue growth and the earnings growth, Tom, this is not, a 1999 kind of tech company. This is, as we've seen over the last, 5-10 years, the technology companies that are leading this market today are profitable, really at the get-go, at the gross margin level, EBITDA and free cash flow positive. These are real companies with revenue growth and real profit margins.
They're heavily indebted, 0.5%.
Exactly.
Folks, the return on invested capital, good morning, Michael Mobison. The return on invested capital from Bloomberg, this is off the acclaimed WACC screen. I steal from it all the time. 73%.
That's not bad. That's
like capital allocation done right.
Yeah, I could do that.
Edward Ludlow, tonight, he's in makeup right now, 11 hours from now, with Jensen of Nvidia. Ed Ludlow, special broadcast tonight, 6 o'clock hour. From New York City, stay with us, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom. This Bloomberg Business Flash. Futures now pretty much on hold. So let's power through some of the earnings we got this morning. Foot Locker shares sliding pre-market, tweaking lower their gross margin range. On the positive side, the comp sales for the second quarter, that did beat. Kohl's out with earnings this morning. Shares up 3.6% pre-market. Kohl's cutting its net sales forecast for the full year, but earnings did beat estimates. Chewy's stock rising pre-market, that's up 2.2%. The online retailer pet food and also pet food products posting better than expected earnings for its fiscal second quarter. Right now, the Dow futures, after yesterday's, another record close for the Dow yesterday. Right now, the futures are up 12 points. S&P E-mini futures down a point. The NASDAQ futures 11 points lower. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out on Apple CarPlay. Had a meeting yesterday with like 42 people telling me all these different ways, Paul, people listen to us. I'm like back, it's Bloomberg 1130 in Boston. That's it.
That's it.
And Nathan's down south somewhere. That's it.
That's it.
It's not.
It's not.
It's amazing.
Streaming, satellite, I don't know.
The summation of all of you listening is great. We're improving on that. September 3rd. We are thrilled to have a massive signal from Mount Katahdin to Block Island. 92.9 FM Boston. Bloomberg on 92.9 FM Boston. Look for that. September 3-ish. And, you know, I mean, people go, how do I do it? They were asking me. I had to sign autographs and all that yesterday. I said, it's all because of John Tucker. Because John Tucker taught me everything he knows. You know, it was great. And with Win Thin, it's the same way. Audrey Childe-Freeman was in tears. In London. She goes, Win's on after me?
Exactly.
We're going from Audrey Childe-Freeman to Win Thin. That's very cool. He was a great mentor to Audrey years ago. Dr. Thin, thank you so much for joining from Brown Brothers Harriman. When I don't want to redux, like what's the Euro call at Brown Brothers Harriman, I want to take your high ownership of Pacific Rim dynamics. What does a China slowdown mean for Burma? What does it mean for Singapore? What does it mean for Vietnam and up to Japan?
Well, first of all, Tom and Paul, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. And Audrey is a tough act to follow. I miss working with her. She's a pleasure to work with. And you guys lucked out in landing her. To me, the China story is just bubbling in the background. I mean, we have some headlines here and there. But when you look through all the noise, the fact of the matter is they really haven't done much to address the underlying problem, which is a huge debt overhang. Debt to GDP is almost 300%. You know, they've tweaked policy. They're pushing on a string right now and trying to support the housing market. But to me, it's a net negative in a sense for a lot of the export-oriented countries such as Singapore, Taiwan. But at the same time, it's a slowing China and sort of a rotation out of China is a net benefit for some of its rivals such as India, Vietnam, and other countries that are sort of picking up the nearshoring, the friendshoring. So it's a mixed bag. But I think in general, the world has to come to grips with the fact that China is growing 2-3%, you know, at most, I think, and it's going to continue to struggle.
Can you be long Pacific Rim? Can you be long as a talking point Vietnam?
Absolutely. For instance, you mentioned Vietnam. It's you know, one of the beneficiaries of the friendshoring. India is another one of them. But even the countries such as Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, look, they have great fundamentals. They still have a solid manufacturing base. They're the source of a lot of the world's chips. So there is still great stories there. It's just that much of the growth in EM over the last 10, 20 years was really driven by China growing 10%. And that sort of turbocharged it. But again, we're sort of in a new normal, but that doesn't mean these countries can't continue to prosper. You know, again, fundamentally, story in the Pacific Rim remains very strong, ex-China, but it's a new normal.
So when, I mean, I guess most of our audience just knows, as you mentioned earlier, that much of the growth coming out of Asia has been China. How about the next 5 to 10 years? I can't imagine that they're going to be comfortable with low single-digit kind of growth in their economy. Is there any way they can turbocharge that, or is there their issues just too fundamental?
No, I think many of the countries in that region have been very much export driven, right? China was growing, the U.S. was growing, everyone's consuming, but we're seeing sort of cooling of global growth, post great financial crisis and now post pandemic. I would say many of these countries are going to try and sort of rotate out of being so export oriented and try and be more domestically oriented, sort of to encourage domestic consumption, domestic prosperity. China's trying to mix the bag, given this huge debt overhang. But I think other countries will start to look a little bit more inward, and in a sense that they have to. Again, we're out of this old world where China was growing 10% and they could just chug and export growth and export their way to prosperity. It's just a new normal. I think they can continue to prosper, but we have to see this rotation away from export orientation, totally. Of course, they'll still export, but more towards domestic consumption.
How consistent do you believe the Bank of Japan will be in kind of trying to raise rates in that country, support the currency? How consistent can they be, do you believe?
Yeah, so, I know you I cut the tail end of your conversation with Audrey. I know you spent a little time on it, so I won't sort of regurgitate, but I do agree that with Audrey that, they've been able to prevent a huge major market meltdown. Yeah, we had that scare a couple of weeks ago, but here we are back at the highs with equities, currencies are stabilizing. So they're managing. I think the bone I would have to pick with the Bank of Japan is they actually admitted, hey, we're on hold because of the market. And I've seen editorials on your page as well. I think Mr. Arian and others is that the central banks can't always be led by the market. It's sort of the tail, it's wag the dog, right? The central banks, Bank of Japan, the Fed, they have to lead the markets. And so far, for instance, if you look at the U.S., the Fed has done a fantastic job. The market's been wrong about the easing cycle. I don't know, I've lost count. I used up all my fingers. But I think that's the story. That the central banks have to be the one that set the theme. And so I was a little disappointed that the Bank of Japan sort of blinked. Right. But they will continue to be very, very cautious. Remember, the last two times they've hiked, they've gone into recession. So I don't blame them for being cautious. But I'm a little, I think they should have stood a little bit stronger.
When there are tentative meetings, an orchestrated ballet between the United States of America and China involving Jake Sullivan, this has been in the news in the last couple of days, folks. And one of the themes there, obviously Taiwan is front and center, but one of the themes is the South China Sea. I think maybe more than anyone we talk to, Dr. Thin, you've lived it. How do we have confidence in investment in the Pacific Rim when we've got ships bumping into each other in the South China Sea?
Yeah, Tom, that to me is like one of the sort of age-old dilemmas as any kind of market strategist. How do you really position for sort of these black swan events, tail risk events on a political sphere? It's difficult. I would sort of point out the fact that we are basically running two ground wars in Europe and Middle East with risk of maybe 3 and 4, and yet the markets are sort of overlooking it. So yeah, I think with political noise, it's always there. I don't mean to diminish it, Tom. I mean, it's a serious risk. But if you're an investor, if you're a multinational, a portfolio manager, you sort of have to look through it and really just kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best. So to me, China is provoking. There's no doubt about it. We've had some as you point out, ships bumping in the Philippines. Right. They had an unprecedented incursion into Japan airspace. I think it was the first time it's been confirmed. I think they're provoking. What I worry about, and I always worry, is something accidental happen. Something. I don't think China's looking to really cause any kind of major conflagration in the area. They are provoking, but what if something accidentally happens where a plane goes down or something? That's what I worry about. And so, to me, I wish that everyone would sort of dial back. But I think unfortunately we're far from that. But,
Winthin, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated as well. While you were talking, Paul, with Brown Brothers Harriman, I was looking at like Vietnam, like an Eric Balchunas thing. Like there's the Ho Chi Minh Stock Index. Mm-hmm. I know nothing about it. But then, of course, there's an ETF.
Oh, boy.
Like I think I can say with one phone call or one key tap on your laptop, you can own Vietnam equity. They haven't done that well. They've sort of they sort of look like an airline stock. Right. They're back to the vicinity of pandemic lows. But
It's interesting what Winthen was talking about. I mean, more other countries in Pacific Rim stepping up. What I have noticed, just as a consumer, when you look at the tag on anything you buy, for example, my $29 baseball cap I got from the U.S. Open yesterday, not made in China anymore. Made in Macau, for example.
Yeah.
Made in Indonesia. Made in Vietnam. I'm noticing more and more of that.
Was your honeydews made in America,
or
was it made in Macau?
Oh, it was made right there in Queens.
Describe coast to coast what a honeydews is.
Like strawberry lemonade, vodka, lots of ice, and then 3 honeydew little balls, like tennis balls, on top, on a toothpick, to die for. It's the signature drink.
How much?
And in fact, there was this $23. The total revenue from the sale of the honeydews covers the winning prize money for the men and women single. That's how much.
Say that again.
The total revenue from selling all these honeydeuces over the course of the 2-week tournament is more than enough to pay for the winnings of the men's single and the women's single.
Combined. Unbelievable.
That's a lot of honeydeuces.
It's called money making.
And then you keep the cup. It's a commemorative cup, Tom. It's got the list of all the winners of the U.S. Open, men and women. And so in our household, we have many years of these honeydews
do we?
cups.
We have them lined up.
Yes, we do.
Carol Masters had the famous hat trick where she had 3 of them in one broadcast.
Exactly.
Masters Stenovic out at the U.S. Open starting tomorrow. Red and green on the screen with our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
I'm making one tonight. Former President Donald Trump is facing a new federal indictment related to allegations he tried to illegally interfere with the last election. The revised charging document comes in light of the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision granting presidents immunity for official acts. Donald Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, spoke in Nashville yesterday about the new federal indictment.
It looks like Jack Smith doing more of what he does, which is filing these absurd lawsuits in an effort to influence the election.
Meanwhile, Vice President Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will embark on a campaign bus tour of Georgia today. Harris and Walz will then give their first interviews since the vice president became a candidate. They agreed to appear on CNN tomorrow night. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will present a plan to force Russia to hold its invasion of his country to President Joe Biden just weeks before the U.S. holds its November elections. Zelensky says he wants to discuss the blueprint with Biden during his trip to the United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York in September. Personal injury attorney Tom Girardi, who gained notoriety when his wife Erica appeared on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, has been found guilty of embezzling $15 million from his clients. The prominent Los Angeles attorney was a key figure in helping secure a settlement that later became the storyline to the movie Erin Brockovich. U.S. Attorney Martina Estrada.
His insatiable appetite for money is what led him to court and what led to this verdict today.
Kimberly Archie, who once worked as a legal consult for the Girardi firm, spoke after the verdict.
I actually believed at one point that Tom Girardi was a decent human being, that he was a hero. You know what they say about meeting your heroes, right? I'm going to disappoint you.
Girardi's sentencing is set for December 6th. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Tom Paul John.
There's a $12 billion transaction in investment. Paul, help me here. They're going to do a 10% stub. The NFL is going to let Blackstone and others own 10% of the Dallas Cowboys. The New York Post has a commitment of $12 billion in capital.
Yep.
What's the real story going on here?
NFL owners are getting even richer. The values of their franchises are going even higher because now you have a new pool of money. Private equity can now own pieces of the NFL franchises for the first time. Wow. I mean, they're just
Washington Redskins Commanders went at $6.05 billion. That makes a Detroit Lions worth now. Who would buy 10% of the Lions?
I would.
I could see.
Lots of people.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Major averages hovering around records. Dow Jones Industrial Average coming off another record close. Most active pre-market shares of, yes, Nvidia. Those shares up about 0.2%. Foot Locker's turnaround continues, but investors not really impressed. Sneaker sellers snapping 5 consecutive quarters of negative comp sales, but it's down to 8.5% pre-market. Nordstrom, that was out with results after the close. They delivered an improved sales outlook. It is up 0.75% pre-market. Bitcoin posting its biggest drop since early August, and crypto-linked stocks, as a result, they fell. Right now, Dow futures down 2, S&P E-mini futures down 2, the NASDAQ futures down 11. The Journal with a story this morning on out-of-office email replies. They offer candor, not courtesy, is the headline. And who does the Journal cite but one Barry Ritholtz?
There we go.
With his outgoing messages.
The king of rude?
The king, well, they don't necessarily.
Snark.
Here's his message. Peacefully contemplating the world. During this time, I'll be out of the office, not checking emails, avoiding texts, ignoring Slack, letting calls go to voicemail, off the grid, and generally unreachable. I wouldn't call it rude. It's very Barry, though.
We sent our thoughts to Barry. He was in the other day. He's getting over hip surgery. Told us all about it.
Looking good.
You know, talking about common sense and equity. I believe a new book by Barry Ritholtz, scheduled for 2026. DiCaprio to play Ritholtz in the movie. Bloomberg Surveillance, brought to you by Interactive Brokers Bond Marketplace. Access their vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities. No markups, no built-in spreads, and low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. Across the Bloomberg intelligence world of how many, Paul? 2, 3, 400, 1,000 people? 435 people. The guy most surreptitiously read is one R. Schiffman, because it's bonds and it's tech and it's debt. Paul Sweeney, why don't you bring in his worship?
Absolutely. Rob Schiffman, technology credit analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Rob, we're going to get Nvidia after the close tonight. From a credit perspective, I'm looking at their balance sheet. They got $30 billion of cash or something. They've got $11 billion of debt. They'll have free cash flow of $60 billion this fiscal year, $85 billion next fiscal year. As a credit analyst, what do you want them to do with their balance sheet?
It must really be a slow summer week to get the credit guy in here talking about Nvidia, huh?
Bottom of the barrel. Continue.
Still so honored to be here. Listen, I did my prep work for today. I Googled what AI was, so I'm all ready to talk about this name. I have the easiest job at Bloomberg, I think, being a credit analyst covering Nvidia or Microsoft or Apple or Amazon.
Right,
or Meta.
Exactly.
It really is really pretty straightforward. I don't think credit people really are paying attention tonight, to be honest. You know, this is an equity story, and the reason why it's an equity story is because it trades at some crazy equity multiple. And the reality is, what can keep that multiple going?
Right.
And it's simply having growth rates that are in excess of what the market anticipates. The growth rates here, though, they're unsustainable over a long period of time. So it's not so much about like today's print, I think. I think it's about how long they can keep this going.
This is the money question for all you global Wall Street. Good morning out in the Hamptons and all the other places around the world. We're fancy people. This is the money question. You're at Cornell, high above Cayuga's waters. You're reading Zvi Bodhi out of Boston University. And there's, M&M and all this other theory about corporate finance, which is you should take advantage of debt. Your world doesn't want debt. Let's start with that. Why does Apple, with all that money, have 3% debt?
Yeah, we've talked a long time about weighted average cost of capital and why all my companies should be levering up and buying back stock.
Why are they? Is it just arrogance?
No, they have nothing else to do with their money. It's pretty simple. Paul asks us all the time, like, why don't they raise dividends? They do. They keep giving money back. It's just more money keeps pouring in, and it's a good problem to have, and that's why you have $3 trillion valuations.
But
and
come on,
bonds.
Nvidia could do a debt offering today in 4 phone calls.
So Nvidia could raise $100 billion of debt this afternoon if they wanted to, and buy back stock, and it wouldn't make.
Why don't they do
because
that?
it wouldn't make any difference to the stock price. Quite frankly, everyone runs their balance sheet for one reason, and it's to maximize their stock price. In this case, it no longer matters what their weighted average cost of capital is. When you're coming off a 200% revenue growth rate, and now you're at 100% revenue growth rate, the key is that you can keep that at 75, 65, 55. Not that you can use $65 or $100 billion of cash to buy back stock or raise dividends by 5%. It really doesn't matter.
So this balance sheet here, I mean, it's the same story for a lot of your big tech names there, Rob. I mean, what do they really do with their balance sheet? And you could argue that it really just doesn't matter because the free cash flow generation supersedes everything?
I actually think Nvidia has a little bit more of a good problem than some of the other big tech names that I cover. If you look at Apple or Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and take a look at what they're spending on CapEx, 40, 50, 60 billion dollars a year.
Not these guys.
Look what Nvidia spends. Less than $2 billion.
Yep.
And I think that what that's going to mean is that they're going to have a more significant buildup in cash relative to their peers. They're going to be required to do something. Nvidia, like we've been talking about these other names increasing buybacks, record buybacks. They've actually been doing that. Nvidia is the baby of this group, and at least from a credit standpoint. From an equity standpoint, they're just as big as everybody. But what they're going to need to start doing, you're going to see massive returns of capital from Nvidia. They have a $25 billion buyback program in place right now.
Well,
I wouldn't be surprised if they doubled it and doubled that again next year.
I mean, we're going to cover this afternoon. I'd love to speak to Jensen and all. Are we going to see that announcement today? Is it in the cards, or is that like a fiscal year-end kind of statement?
I think there's a decent chance you could see it today just because they have such a small authorization as is. So oftentimes, like especially if they miss, sometimes companies try to help their stock price by putting in some sort of shareholder return boost. I wouldn't be shocked. I honestly, though, I don't think it really makes a difference. I do think, though, Nvidia, they do not look like their peers because of this capital expenditure requirement that's so minimal. If you compare them to what was, the biggest semiconductor company for a long, long time, Intel, you couldn't have more of a stark differential. And that's because one company has to spend tens of billions of CapEx, another doesn't.
Well, John Tucker was just asking me the question earlier. What happened to Intel? What happened to Intel?
Well, Intel had a lock on the PC market for decades. And it's a great business, and it still is a great business. But the reality is they've got two businesses. One is they develop their own chips and sell them, and they also make chips for others. And when you're in the foundry business, it takes lots of years and lots of billions of dollars to build capacity. When Pat Gelsinger came back, he said, we're going to double down on foundry capacity. And that cost a ton of money. It created a negative free cash flow position. And then what happens is their core business, their core PC business, is in decline.
I got 30 seconds. I know it's the first time you've been in the office since July. Robert Schiffman, just as simple as I can, where is Nvidia 5 years from now? I don't mean the numbers, I mean just you is steeped in the technology business. What does Jensen's company look like 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think others are going to catch up. I mean, in the world of hardware, we've seen tons of companies develop, killer apps, better mousetraps, and then over time, that sort of disappears. There's a few companies that are anomalies, like in Apple, but I think others over time are going to end up catching up to Nvidia, and you're also going to see growth rates slow down. It's just a law of large numbers. I think they're going to be the dominant player in the AI market, at least from a hardware perspective and a chip perspective 5 years from now. I'd be wary, though, that these lofty types of multiples can be maintained.
Robert Schiffman, thank you so much. Can't say enough about the appearance today. Robert Schiffman driving all of our technology, as Paul correctly says, balance sheet analysis.
It's great. I mean, just to be a CFO or controller of some of these big tech companies, and all the cash just comes in every day. And now you're actually generating a return on that cash with rates where they are. He
explained why they don't have debt. I just don't buy it. I got cost of debt, Apple, almost 11%. Cost of equity, almost 11. Cost of debt, almost 4. I flat out don't understand it. Okay, 92.9 FM Boston. They're going classic rock to Bloomberg September 3rd. We are only playing classic rock up to September 4th. Bloomberg Surveillance. You start strong with Bon Jovi.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, out, John Tucker, in, on a very interesting Wednesday. Robert Schiffman was lights out on Nvidia. Huge response.
Easiest job at Bloomberg to be a credit analyst for technology companies.
Yeah, but he's talking about Intel, the debacle there.
Yep.
It was very good. We'll have much more on that through the day. And, of course, this afternoon, big equity event, big tech event. We'll have coverage. Ed Ludlow with Jensen. You can look for that tonight in the 6 o'clock hour, special edition of Bloomberg Technology. Speaking of technology, we are embracing YouTube as best as we can. Subscribe out on YouTube to Bloomberg Podcasts. You go there, there's a little chiclet with Lisa Mateo on it, and you click on that, and there's John Tucker Live, which is, not the worst torture. We're on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto as well, and all sorts of other things. And we should mention, big announcement for us, giant signal from New England, from Mount Katahdin in Maine down to the National Hotel in Block Island, 92.9 FM in Boston. We're going to do that September 3rd. We're only playing classic rock at the end of the hours.
Nice, very good.
Now until September. We started with Bon Jovi, which I thought.
Yep, solid.
John Tucker, were you glad that we started with Living on a Prayer? Bon Jovi?
Not a Jovi fan.
Your neighbors.
Why did I know that?
Your neighbors.
Yeah, he's just down the street.
Just down the street.
I see him in his PJs taking out the trash in the morning.
Yeah, his Bruce slippers. Right now, we got a little red on the screen, -6. A VIX under 16 is important, 15.80. Right to it from the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, John Bon Jovi Tucker.
And right now, the major averages in the pre-market: Dow E-mini futures down 28, S&P futures down 5, NASDAQ futures 33 points lower. Well, analysts expect a more than 70% boost in revenue growth from Nvidia ahead of earnings after the close. Most active again at just about no change. Kohl's rising 3%. The retailer raising its full-year forecast for earnings per share and operating margin. Another earnings report this morning: Foot Locker dropping around 6%. Second quarter same-store sales beat estimates, but it's not enough to sustain the stock's rally of 46% since the last earnings report. Here's a different indicator for you. Surveyed by the Dallas Fed, one manufacturer notes modest growth in its sausage category. It's one of several products said to be correlated with an economic downturn. Americans apparently replacing steaks with sausage on their shopping lists. We have Brent crude right now down $1.15, 78.40. NYMEX crude down $1.21, 74.32 a barrel. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. I'm going to say this right out front. We protect the copyright of all of our guests. If you want to hear the brilliance you're going to hear here in a moment, you want to read about it, go to HSBC and check for the work of Nicole Inouye. She is world-class in LATAM equity strategy. Comes from Brazil today, but we're really going to focus on the United States economy with her, as we can do. Just bulletproof experience out of Columbia and Georgetown. Nicole, you have the strongest 2 pages in your note on the haves and the have-nots of America. It's real simple. The have-nots are struggling. We all know that. And the haves are there getting it done. What does that relationship that you show in your charts brilliantly, what does that relationship look like in 2025?
Well, that's a great question. What we've seen all year is this K-shaped consumer, the high-end consumer doing well, benefiting from wealth effects from higher home prices, higher equity prices, and a lower income consumer that is definitely struggling, definitely feeling the pinch of inflation and really searching for value. So, we've seen this in the macro data. We've seen this in the company commentary. So we're seeing how companies are reporting. You're seeing companies in the consumer sector doing very well because they're gaining share. So you're seeing a middle income consumer trading down. You're seeing these large retailers really able to promote and show value and bring more flow to their stores. Next year, we're in a mode now of rate cutting. So we expect the Fed to cut in September, as everybody else does. We expect a gradual rate cutting cycle. And this should add some relief for this consumer or these areas of the economy that have been weak. So we have a weaker housing market. We've seen this through some of the data on the home improvement retailers that have seen more struggles in terms of sales. So you could see some relief there. You could see some relief with the low-income consumer, which really is the part of the consumer that is feeling the impact of higher rates. And we've seen this through higher delinquencies in auto loans and credit card loans.
Right.
So we think as rate comes down, you're going to see some relief in these really areas, points of weakness, pockets of weakness that we're seeing in the economy right now.
Nicole, what did you make of this earnings season here and kind of some of the outlook we heard from some of these companies?
This earnings season has been great. You look at the second quarter, we're seeing almost 80% of the companies beating on EPS. And what we liked about this quarter is we're seeing this broadening of earnings growth. So it's no longer just a tech Mag 7 story. You're seeing financials, you're seeing utilities, you're seeing healthcare, all growing earnings at a similar rate as tech. So again, tech is still performing very well. You still have very high ROEs, but you're seeing other sectors that are catching up, and it's really bringing into this broadening of this equity rally that we expect over the second half of the year. And the commentary from the company. So if you look at guidance, has been very positive. So, you have those two combinations, and that sets the stage for a very good second half of the year in terms of corporate earnings, where, again, expectations are high. But what we found interesting is you're not seeing analysts revising higher estimates. So you had EPS beats, you have positive commentary from the companies, but you're really seeing earnings for this year pretty much staying stable. So you're not seeing analysts put that into their numbers yet for 2024.
Nicole, one of the big stories today here at Bloomberg Radio and Television is the earnings after the close of Nvidia. As a strategist, are you concerned at all that it seems like the market and the market's performance seems to be tied fairly closely to one stock?
Concentration risk is, the risk we learn in Finance 101. You have to diversify. And yes, what we've seen so far this year is this rally has been highly concentrated. We looked for the past 30 years and we haven't found a time where we have had such a concentration in terms of this equity rally year to date in a small subset of stocks. So obviously when something's very concentrated, you do have that concentration risk. I think I'm not going to comment on individual stocks, but this is why we think, again, tech continues to perform very well. It's less of an outlier as before. And we really think going into the second half of the year, the investors should broaden into some of these other sectors that we think earnings growth can
Right.
keep up. And we're going to see actually an acceleration and should do very well.
Nicole, you come from Brazil, and just as a general statement, do you see a political stability across South America that can lead to financial and economic success that leads to stock market appreciation?
Yes, I mean, in Latin America, we've had not a great start of the year. So if we look at the returns year to date, they have been down. A lot of this has been part of the currency weakness that we've seen, both in Mexico, both in Brazil. But, let's talk about the positive. We're seeing growth, GDP growth in Brazil coming in better than expected. We're seeing corporate earnings across the region. So Mexico and Brazil coming in very strong. These are companies that have strong balance sheets. They pay a great dividend yield. So you're looking on a total return basis. These stocks are very attractive, and you're looking at equity valuations that are highly discounted. I think with any market, you have to find those pockets of strength. Overall, it's, you're looking at a consumer, you're looking at some of these fintech companies that are doing extremely well, but really it's, a stock picker's market.
Nicole, thank you so much. Nicole Inouye with us, head of U.S. and LATAM equity strategy for HSBC. Phenomenal work on the polarization, the parts of the American consumer. Again, futures at -7, though the VIX under 16, 15.82. The 2-year yield, wow. I mean, there's no other way to put it, 3.85%, really down near new low yields for the 2-year. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Vice President Kamala Harris has agreed to her first interview since she kicked off her presidential campaign more than a month ago. Bloomberg's Laura Davison has more from Washington.
She and Tim Walz will sit down for an interview Thursday evening with CNN. This is the first time they've done that since they became a ticket. Harris, the first time since she became the nominee. This is something that Trump and other Republicans have really criticized her for not doing one of these unscripted appearances. Of course, there will be debate, allegedly next month on September 10th. There's been some discussion between Trump and Harris about if that will happen. But this will be, later this week, her first time that voters will really get to see her, when she's not in front of a teleprompter, not totally in control of where the discussion is going.
Bloomberg's Laura Davison reports that the discussion is set for tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Wall Street time on CNN. Today, Harris and Walz will visit Savannah, Georgia. Republican vice presidential candidate and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance hit the campaign trail in Big Rapids, Michigan. After the rally, Vance slammed the tone of the Harris campaign and claimed that she talked down to voters during her acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention.
Criticize what I want to do, criticize what Donald Trump wants to do, but this whole wag your finger and warn you of extremely serious consequences, I feel like she sounds like a vice principal who's criticizing a student and not a vice president who's trying to lead the country. I just don't like the tone.
Trump and Vance have come under fire for various personal attacks so far in the 2024 campaign. The U.S. Special Counsel investigating Donald Trump is pressing ahead with prosecuting the former president on charges of trying to overturn the 2020 election. Special Counsel Jack Smith filed an updated indictment that removed several pages of allegations following the Supreme Court's blockbuster decision finding Trump at least partially immune from prosecution related to his official acts as president. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. John Tucker, Paul Sweeney, jump in here from New Jersey. I loved interviewing and talking to Bill Pascrell, only and always of Paterson, New Jersey. I missed this. I was out at Jackson Hole. Michael Barr, thank you so much for mentioning it this morning. The death of Bill Pascrell at 87. Talk about old school. He got angry at me once, John. He goes, Tom, in my district, there's 11 languages. That was Paterson, New Jersey.
He's like, get real.
Yeah.
He's the definition of what
we
the
all
former
want.
House Speaker would say, it's all local. So
It's all local. He was mayor of Paterson and that. But I would suggest on all sides of the political aisle now, there's just this yearning for more Bill Pascrells, people that are actually
And that was very normal to
politicians.
not only be the mayor of Paterson, but also,
Right.
maybe the congressman or a local assembly leader, like before him, Frank Graves used to hang up on me.
Yeah. I just used to hang up on you.
Because I wasn't quick enough with the questions.
I love talking to Bill Pascrell. He has died at 87. He is I'm sorry, Republicans, Democrats, all of it. It's what we want is people wedded to the local community. Sergeant in the U.S. Army,
Sergeant in the US
going
Army for
into
9 years,
Vietnam, and just did it all. The death of Bill Pascrell at 87. Futures at -8. From New York City on YouTube, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. More retailers reporting earnings results this morning. Just crossed it a few minutes ago. Abercrombie & Fitch beating analyst sales expectations for the 6th consecutive quarter, but not enough to satisfy investors. This comes after a big run-up in the stock price this year. Right now in the pre-market, Abercrombie & Fitch is down 10%. And as we look at the major stock averages, Dow futures right now 39 points lower, down 0.1%. S&P E-mini futures, they're down 5. That's down 0.1%. The Nasdaq futures right now 28 points lower. That is down 0.1%. Of course, most active pre-market shares of Nvidia right now up about 0.1% ahead of the earnings report after the close of regular trading today. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul, Tom.
Thanks so much, John Tucker. It's been way too long. I guess it's the boredom of a gallon of gas or a barrel of oil. Paul Sankey joins now. Sankey Research, just absolutely iconic in trying to figure out hydrocarbons. Paul, why haven't we talked to you? Why is the oil patch so boring?
Wait, I thought I was here to talk about Nvidia results.
Exactly, weigh in.
No, you know what it is? I think it's technology, actually. You know, the companies are so much better at producing oil and gas than they were in the past. You know, as you know, they've had very disciplined capex, you know, but we've got 3 million barrels a day of spare capacity in oil. I mean, that's a lot of oil, Tom, as you know. So, yeah, it's just oversupplied. And to make it worse, U.S. natural gas is oversupplied. U.S. refining is arguably oversupplied, and chemicals are oversupplied. So I'm not surprised you don't want to talk to me more often.
Birthday greetings to Warren Buffett. He's 94. It's today or tomorrow. I'm sorry, I can't remember which. But birthday greetings to Mr. Buffett, who has changed so much of how we think. Paul Sankey, he has an interest in Vicky Hullab's company, Occidental Petroleum. What is the Occidental Petroleum distinction?
Well, I think that they originally came to him for money, right, in order to buy Anadarko, and I think that's how he got into it. I had been told by somebody who knows that his original interest was actually in OxyChem, the chemicals chlor-alkali business, which is sort of a, you know, oligopoly type, very high cash flow business that would suit Buffett very well, Buffet, as you say, very well. But I think subsequently, because of the amount of stake he had in the company in terms of the risk of the debt, I think he decided, and with all the cash he had, I think he decided to build a major stake. Now, having said that, I mean, you may have noticed, but he stopped buying it at the same time that it was announced that, you know, he'd sold down Apple, and so the stock we expect to actually be weak here, and we're a little bit negative, obviously, at the moment, just because of that lack of buying that drove the stock so high.
Paris from Paris emails in. Mr. Buffet's birthday, August 30.
Okay.
She's in charge of putting the candles on the cake.
Oh, boy, good luck to that. Hey, Paul, I'm just looking at the price of Brent crude. Here we're at $78 and change here. It seems like since the end of 2022, it's kind of been in a fairly tight trading range. Where do I have to focus? Supply, demand? What's driving this?
Well, demand is fine. You know, demand is actually pretty good. Now, of course, as you know, we've seen peak demand in the U.S. We're now in effectively in decline or long plateau, and obviously there are major worries about China. But the weight of global population is just so immense, and the fundamental nature of oil to economic activity is, you know, an important driver of demand. So the demand side looks fine. The problem is definitely supply. And the reason that we've been in this range that you talk about, which does look like a good range, I mean, you know, it's been quite tightly held, is basically Saudi managing the market. The problem is that UAE, who is the core of OPEC alongside Saudi, wants to produce more oil. And they're concerned that essentially they'll be left with reserves that never get produced because of the sheer size of their reserves, if they don't produce the oil relatively quickly. And they're keen to get towards 5 million barrels a day of output, where they're currently at closer to 3. So there alone, you have 2 million barrels a day. Keeping in mind that in a good year, the market grows 1 million. That's when we talk about the 3 million barrels a day of spare capacity being such an overhang. But it hasn't been produced. And so, you know, the oil prices have maintained the range. The issue is we're in Q3, which is a strong quarter for oil demand. But now we're going into the end of the year, which weakens, and OPEC wants to increase. And that's why we've been kind of bearish.
On your acclaimed spreadsheets, does electric vehicles click into it at all? I mean, Paul, for 1 year or now or 5 years out or that, is there any marginal tweak supply or demand because of EV?
100%. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the largest single sector in oil is U.S. gasoline. And, that's 10 million barrels a day, right? 1 in 10 barrels consumed globally. And obviously, if you have a significant EV penetration, that's going to, we've been working on that for 10 or 15 years, 12, absolutely. And it is negative for gasoline demand, obviously. It's just that the rate of sales is somewhat disappointing. And, the penetration into the fleet is therefore also weaker than you might have anticipated. Yeah. The other interesting thing, Tom, which, most people just don't know, is that California is now 60% of its diesel demand is renewable diesel. This is a big number. And so we're really seeing the transition. I know there's been a lot of bumps in the road, but in reality, the transition is occurring. The other thing that California has done is add a lot of batteries, which we've always said is the holy grail of energy. So, these things are actually happening. It's been a bit messy, but we are in a transition. There's no question. And that, of course, is negative for oil demand.
So, Paul, I mean, I guess one of the questions, maybe a little bit more in the nearer term, is OPEC talking about maybe letting sunset some of their supply constraints. Kind of, where are we with OPEC these days? How much are they really impacting global prices?
Well, as we said, I mean, it's very important. I think we'd be $10 at least lower if Saudi hadn't taken this voluntary additional million barrels a day off the market. So they're holding back their own 1 million barrels a day that they can add pretty much any time. And as I said, the key to the OPEC relationship is Saudi and UAE, with the UAE wanting to increase production. Elsewhere, the other key thing, which is a mess, and I always say if they're speaking, they're lying, is what's going on in Russia, because we don't really. I mean, it's part of the non-OPEC setup, obviously, but what's more important is Ukrainian attacks on their infrastructure, on their refining, on their shipping, if that's what happens. And that's obviously reducing oil supply globally because of the Russian situation.
Paul Sankey, thank you so much. Sankey Research there, way too long. We're going to get you on. He's got to be on every 30 days, every time.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Did you see, and I saw the Hummer EV. The one John has. Yeah,
wow, okay.
I saw an ad for it.
All right.
It's very
I'm sure
very
Matt Miller
cool.
will be testing it shortly.
The only one working at Citigroup is Gisela Hoxa. Hollenhorst is gone. Veronica Clark's off for the month of August. Gisela releases a Citigroup daily update. Labor market is softening. This is the first look at that key, I believe, September 6th number. We project 125,000 new jobs.
Okay.
The unemployment rate to stay at 4.3%. But they say it's not weather-related distortions, surging labor supply. It reflects a slowdown in hiring. Thank you for Gisela for working today.
Exactly.
But, that gets us out to that next key data.
It does.
Is it more important than Nvidia? Maybe.
Maybe for the Federal Reserve. We'll see.
Paul and I are, full disclosure, folks, we're into intelligent conversation on Nvidia, like you're going to hear with Ed Ludlow tonight. With Jensen, is it Wang?
Wang.
Jensen Wang, the CEO of this miracle. It's 30,000 people. I mean, we think it's like 200,000 people.
Yeah.
It's not.
No, but it's a stock that has just got extraordinary valuation, Tom. $3.2 trillion is the market cap today. It's up 160% just this year.
I didn't know that.
Yep. Wow.
Because I don't own
it. Exactly, so you don't own it.
Triple leveraged all cash, it's not there.
That's all right, but you're getting a nice
5%. But there's Balchunas told us there's an Nvidia leveraged ETF.
And I'm sure there's one on the short side as well. XOXL.
Thank you. Look at the control room in here. Oh, that's what you guys are doing when we're missing cues. You guys are in Robinhood day trading from the surveillance control room. The secret's out now. Stay with us. Busy week ahead. From New York City on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Futures right now indicate slightly lower open. Nvidia expected to project revenue growth of more than 70% for the current quarter. It reports, of course, after the market closed, most active, little change right now. Super microcomputer shares set to extend their losses after that Hindenburg research report saying it's short the maker of server equipment. Bitcoin was below $60,000, precipitating a drop in crypto-linked stocks like CleanSpark. Kohl's adding over 4%, the retailer raising its full-year earnings forecast. And then you also had, among the retailers, Abercrombie & Fitch beating analyst sales expectations for the sixth consecutive quarter, but that fails to impress investors. Those shares, they are down right now. Dow futures, 40 points lower. S&P E-mini futures down about 5. The NASDAQ futures, 20 points lower. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. He's back from the $1 Million Cowboy Bar.
Tonight in a bar alone I'm sitting. Yes. Apart from the laughter and the cheer.
Bob Wills, Bubbles in My Beer. Michael McKee, who foundationally has done our Jackson Hole theme for years, really providing the leadership and the excellence of all in Jackson Hole. What a speech. 10 years from now, will this be the speech that they will remember of Jerome Powell?
I don't think so, actually. I mean, he basically told people what they were expecting to hear. He was a little more direct about it. It's going to be that 8-minute we'll do whatever it takes speech that people will remember because it was so outside the bounds of what was expected. And that's kind of the way these things go. I do think it was a strong speech and laid out where they're going to be, and the markets are obviously reacting to that. But it wasn't a shocking speech like that. I mean, you remember the 8 minutes? We were
stunning.
We were sitting there going, "Oh, wait a minute, we have to talk for a long time now."
Right, exactly. Well, I remember listening to the speech and thinking, I don't need Michael McKee to read between the lines for me because he was very clear. I thought that somebody like me, a layperson, could say, "Oh, they are committed to cutting rates." And I think the market, Michael, is paying attention. We got the 2-year Treasury, 3.86%. The market's kind of getting us there already.
Well, here's the funny thing. You look a month ago, and I was looking at this morning at the yield curve, the 2-year yield is down over 50 basis points.
Yeah, wow.
Fed, because they've set this up, has gotten a cut already in rates. And we did see this morning that mortgage rates, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association, are at their lowest in more than a year.
Does that fold into GDP? Sweeney's going ecstatic on that. Does that fold into GDP? Can you say this tone and this yield structure supports the Atlanta GDP now forecast?
Well, it appears to. Atlanta's come down. They're at 2% now. So that's approximately, or maybe just a little bit above potential, what people think of as potential growth. We'll see how this goes into the last months of the quarter because it is back to school season. We get GDP this Thursday, but that's just a revision to the second quarter. So it'll be a while before we know, but it does appear at this point that people are still spending. We get a spending report for the month of July coming up on Friday, and that'll be of interest.
And it seems like, I'm just looking at the core PCE month to month, 0.2% is what we're kind of looking for, 2.7% on a year-to-year basis. I would think the Fed feels very comfortable with those numbers.
Fed's comfortable with those numbers. It's not going to be a sign of progress in the sense that the year-over-year numbers don't go down, but a part of that is base effects because inflation was high last year. But we'll see if it makes enough progress, and then underneath the hood, they're looking particularly at housing in the CPI and the PCE to see if it is finally coming down as they anticipated.
Right. Maybe in Florida.
Yeah, not in New York.
I mean, there's like Ken Griffith and Citadel. Everybody moving to Florida. They're living large like Mike McGlone. Okay, fine. And then there's a Florida struggling. It's the same thing out in Wyoming. I mean, we just had Nicole Inouye on from HSBC with brilliant charts of the polarization of American consumption. You see it in Jackson Hole. I mean, Bramo's on the Gulfstream. I'm sitting there at Gate 10 at JAC waving at Bramo in the window of the Gulfstream. The polarization of the consumer in America, Michael, I would suggest we've never seen this. Does the Fed care?
Yes, they care, but can they do anything about it? No. I mean, I was actually talking with a Fed governor out there about this, and there were some protesters out there, as there usually are, from the Fed Up group. About, they are upset about the polarization or the financial divide. But the Fed has one tool. They can raise interest rates or lower interest rates. They can't do anything about it. This is an issue that's got to be addressed on the fiscal side. So if you're going to protest that, go show up at a Donald Trump or Kamala Harris event and protest.
Was there a sense or in any discussion of this American exceptionalism in terms of the economic environment these days? Was there any discussion of that in Jackson Hole?
Not discussion of it in that sense. So there's an acknowledgement that the U.S. economy is, at this point, performing better than all of the others. And there's a lot of reasons why that you can't exactly point to one reason, but that was sort of taken for granted at this point. It's been in the data for a while.
Okay, my annual question drives me nuts over the private nature of this. The papers that were actually given. Past the grizzly bear. Did you see a photo?
Yeah.
Of me,
I
Amber,
did see that.
Shaq with the Grizz.
Big
Grizz was
bear.
a big help, but with security moving off the other bears. Mike, the papers in that closed room behind the grizzly bear, which paper stood out to you?
The Egerton paper on the difference between, or the impact of the beverage curve on the Phillips curve. Now, I've just set you up to see why this is not an exciting conference for a lot of people, other than the chairman's speech. But the paper basically posited that the beverage curve, which tracks the difference between the job openings and the unemployment rate, they argue that when you get to a certain level of that, then the Phillips curve gets more vertical, and you get a higher unemployment rate.
Can you, when you talk to them, because you have so much impact, can you, when Kansas City calls you, like Gaudi's paper with Pierpaolo Benigno, it's 51 pages, and they keep it secret instead of, so I could sell it on air. You know, I mean, you're right. It's like inward economics, but at the same time, there's this huge secrecy at Kansas City. Why is that secrecy there?
I can't give you an answer. I don't know why. I suppose they feel that some papers might be market moving, and so they want.
Really, you think so?
I mean, I don't know. I've not asked because, as an invited guest, I do get to see advanced copies.
Oh,
of
you do?
those.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You're looking at a non-invited guest.
Yeah, we're not in the TP.
There's, John, if you went out, you'd be a non-invited guest.
Story.
I don't know. They might let John in. You know?
Did you get a merch bag?
No, there's
no merch.
There's no swag.
No swag.
No swag out there.
It's U.S. government after all.
Is the party? Is it what day? Friday night? Is that the big party?
It's Western night.
Western night.
Yeah.
Economists go wild.
No, not exactly. But they do pass out fake cowboy hats and tin stars if people want to dress up Western.
Right.
But it is not. That's not the. I mean,
Right.
when you say party, it's not exactly a
any
raucous event.
Do you see any bison out there?
Yes.
Oh, lots.
Yeah.
Right.
They're
Got
there.
stuck in one bison traffic jam, and I mean, they're all over the place. They can go anywhere they want. They can walk into the
they
studio.
make the rules.
Nobody
They
tells
make the
them what
rules,
they can do.
And my driver said that it's actually been a really difficult, like summer and all.
Right.
There's lots of animals out there. Michael McKee, thank you so much. Thank you so much for his leadership. I mean, he's got some fancy title about domestic and international economics, but basically, Mike McKee running the show for us on economics. Major shout out, Amber Ali. Thank you so much for the choreography that we got of keeping Dr. Posen on speaking terms with Dr. Egerton and the rest of it. It's very political out of Jackson Hole as well. Should we shift to Nvidia?
Why not? Why not? I mean, after the close today, I mean, Carol Masser, Tim Stenovic, they'll be breaking down the earnings as they cross the tape here. But it just is Mandeep Singh from Bloomberg Intelligence has said for 4 or 5 quarters now, the bar is extremely high in terms of not only the results but the guidance. But they clear that bar, it seems like, every quarter. So we'll see if they can do it again.
I mean, don't you agree with me that if it was a shaky quarter, they would have whispered it out? There would have been some nugget 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, maybe, and I have not seen any analysts kind of waver here ahead of it. I mean, the channel checks you hear from some of these Wall Street analysts are still pretty positive. So we'll see what they can do tonight.
I mean, let me look here quickly. We got to get
trailing
to
12 months up 175%.
Yeah, I mean, if you do a standard deviation study of Nvidia, I'll have this math for you in a moment. It's ginormous. The spread here, looking at the success of Nvidia and what that means for support if bad news happens. With our good news across the nation, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. The U.S. Special Counsel investigating Donald Trump for election interference is pressing ahead with his case. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has details.
It partially got derailed when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a president could have partial immunity, at least for official actions while in office. So Special Counsel Jack Smith updated the indictment that removes several allegations, but does feature the same 4 charges accusing Trump of conspiring to reverse his election loss. The new grand jury action comes less than 3 months before the election. There will be more legal wrangling to come, and Smith said that he does not expect a trial before Election Day. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Senator J.D. Vance, speaking in Nashville, gave his reaction to the news.
I think it's clearly an effort to try to do more election interference from Jack Smith. He should be ashamed of himself.
Vice President Harris and Minnesota Governor Walz will embark on a campaign bus tour of Georgia today. Meanwhile, Harris and Walz will give their first interviews since the vice president became a candidate on CNN tomorrow night. Latino activists in Texas are demanding a federal investigation into allegations of voter intimidation and harassment by State Attorney General Ken Paxton. Lydia Martinez says she'd just been released from the hospital last week when 9 armed men with a warrant rang her doorbell at 5 a.m.
They searched everything in my house.
The 87-year-old is a member of the League of United Latin American Citizens and a longtime voter registration volunteer. AG Paxton has said the raids were part of an ongoing election integrity investigation. Extreme heat is affecting millions of people across the country, including kids who just went back to school. Forecasters say that almost 24 cities in the Midwest and Northeast could see record highs today, with triple-digit temperatures for some. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
This makes news like in June. Heat wave. It's like OMG heat wave. Late August, we're like, yeah, okay, so what? But the answer is the same heat in late August that it is in early June.
Yes, it is. It's hot.
Serious stuff.
Yeah, summer, last gasp of summer, all good.
Smartest thing I heard all summer was Gina Martin Adams, mainstay of Florida, and she was heated that it's changed Florida, that Florida's not the same anymore because of the persistent heat.
I have in-laws that live in Florida, and they said the same thing that you just said.
It's just changed.
Plus, there's a lot more people down there now.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Florida.
But, we'll have to see. I'm going to sell this early. I mean, Paul's going to talk about it as well. But to have Damian Sassower in, we don't need to do EM.
No.
We did that with Winthin. We did that with Audrey Childe-Freeman. We got to talk to Damian Sassower about the National Football League, looking at a 10% stub. Special edition Bloomberg Business of Sports coming up with Damian Sassower on the $12 billion is one statistic I saw that they would bring in.
Richer. Nice.
I don't know what to
Good
see.
for them.
So we've got red on the screen, futures at -4, VIX 15.74. Edward Ludlow, Bloomberg Technology, a special 6 p.m. this afternoon.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Futures edging a bit lower ahead of Nvidia's release. The options market, interestingly enough, implying swings of nearly 10% in either direction on the day after the results. Nvidia shares steady in pre-market trading, having rallied about 160% this year. Some retailer results this morning. Let's do Kohl's. Those shares higher. The retailer raising its full-year earnings forecast. In the second quarter, Americans between the ages of 44 and 59 ramped up IRA contributions to the highest in 5 years. This according to a Fidelity Investments report released this morning. The universe of 401k millionaires with accounts at Fidelity rising to almost 500,000 millionaires. Dow futures right now 34 points lower. S&P futures down 4, and the Nasdaq futures down 16. We check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. I was wrong. I never thought that gambling would come back to sports, and it did, and boy, did it fast. Bloomberg Business Week with a terrific article on how it's taken over our lives. It's a serious issue. And now Dynasty Equity took out a stake in Liverpool off of Fenway Sports Group, John Henry, and the Boston Red Sox. But I guess now, Paul, it's a feeding frenzy. We must turn to Damian Sassower on his equity ownership that we're going to see in an NFL team. Just cut to the chase, Damian. Is this just a cash out by the owners?
I think it's just opening up the league to a bigger buyer base. And look, there are plenty of teams here. I mean, the Eagles, the Dolphins, the Bills, the Chargers, the Browns, the Bears. I mean, there's a lot of old owners that are looking to, kind of diversify their buyer base. And believe me, in the case of the Bears, 101-year-old Virginia McCaskey, she needs to create a plan for how the ownership of that company, of the franchise, is going to pass through. And I think this allows her to really maximize. John Tucker, I do not know the answer.
Let's back up, Paul. Yankees, $7 billion one estimate.
Okay.
Dallas Cowboys, more money than God, $10 billion estimate. The Washington Redskins Commanders went for $6-ish billion to the guy that started Apollo. Damian, they just want to get a cash out right now, as you mentioned.
I don't know if they want to get a cash out right now, but I think what they want to do is reset the valuations. I mean, if you just look at NFL teams relative to, F1, or for that matter, soccer, football in the European League, I mean, the fact that private equity can get involved in some of these other sports allows it allows them to extract a higher valuation. And so, what I think is most interesting here is, where does all this go? I mean, we know the 6 or 7, but there's a 31-1 vote by NFL ownerships to allow private equity firms to take up to a 10% ownership stake in franchises they can invest in. And get this, Paul, up to 6 different franchises. I guess if you're a minority investor, you should be allowed to do that. No conflict of interest there. I mean, Pete Rose. But I mean, you get what I'm saying. I mean, there's still a lot to be worked out. I think it's notable that the one franchise that did not vote in favor, the Cincinnati Bengals. So, we'll see what that means, whether or not, Paul Brown, ownership, son of Mike Brown. No, I have it the other way. Sorry. Bengals co-founder Paul Brown's son, Mike Brown, voted against it. And maybe that's just because the buyer base for the Cincinnati franchise is not quite what you would otherwise expect. But hey, look, they've got Jamar Chase. They've got Joe Burrow. They got a good team. They're looking good.
I think two things here. One, this is just another catalyst to drive these valuations for these franchises higher. Number two, as you mentioned, Damian, there are a lot of family ownership, right, which was the original set of owners for this league. But the prices have just gotten too big.
Look at the Seahawks. So Paul Allen.
If you want to continue to fund the growth of the NFL, it's not going to come from wealthy owners. It's got to come from institutional money. And that's this is just the first step, by the way.
That's right.
This is just the first step. That 10% passive stake is just the first step.
Well, I think also, once I win the fantasy league here at Bloomberg this year, I'll be in a better position to put my 2 cents in and maybe talk to Woody Johnson, Jets owner, and see if I can get involved there. No, I'm kidding. But truthfully, I did have an amazing fantasy draft last night. I blew Rich Truman and Michael Barr out of the water. So, it's going to be fun to see this season. But look, I digress. I talk about the Seahawks. You look at someone like Paul Allen, his wife is running the team, after his death. What comes next for her? You look at some of these other franchises, right, the Los Angeles, what comes next for them? So, this opens up a lot of doors.
Will they have their patches on their jerseys? I mean, is it going to be, you're gonna sit down and
Ken Griffin has Citadel patches on the Miami Dolphins.
Citadel on the left shoulder of the Miami Dolphins.
You might. I mean, look. I mean, let's put it this way. He's also trying to buy a stake in the F1 Miami Grand Prix, right? So if Stephen Ross allows, someone like a Ken Griffin to buy a stake in the Dolphins, what's to say they don't cross market and they have, I don't know, Red Bull or Mercedes F1? I mean, on their who knows?
Okay, then how does this fall back to TV revenues? I mean, if these things are worth. If the Cowboys are $10 billion and let's say they're worth $16 billion on a redo, Paul, what does that do to the TV rights?
Well, the TV rights
or the payers play.
The TV rights drive all valuation,
That's right.
or I would say 90% of the valuation of these franchises.
And it's already locked in.
It's already locked in, and now
Right.
even though you've got the demise of the traditional broadcast and cable networks, you have the rise of the technology companies who, in fact, have deeper pockets. Now, whether the Amazons of the world, Apples, ever want to really get involved in sports, which I think they eventually will, then that's a whole new ballgame there.
No, I agree with you. I think, it's just a matter of time until the private equity arm of Amazon, of Jeff Bezos, is basically taking a stake in these companies, right? Why wouldn't he? He's incentivized to build up those franchises and build up their awareness.
We have to run and plug Nvidia because it's the only thing that matters on the planet.
Rob Schiffman, I heard him earlier.
Yeah.
But Damien, very, very importantly, in Paul missed this conversation yesterday out at his Honeydeuce U.S. Open.
That's right.
But Damien, we all want to know how Michael Barr had such a lousy draft last night. Every year it's the same act. What did
he's
Barr
great.
do
He's a real
wrong
competitor.
last night?
He had a tough draw. He was at the 12 hole, so you get boxed in at the 12 hole in a 12-man draft. But he actually did pretty good. The name of his franchise is the Pocono 400. So, got to be careful about the Pocono 400 this year. No, he did pretty well. I did steal a few Detroit Lions from him. I have his quarterback, Jared Goff, and one of his receivers, Jamison Williams, on my squad. So, yeah, by the way, the name of my team is Everything Bagel. So let's be clear, it's because we have Everything Bagels here at Bloomberg on Thursdays. It's my favorite day of the week.
I've never had
You have to go down to LL2.
Yeah, well, I'm a little.
We'll send our people down.
Send an intern down.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything Bagel is your team. When does this pain start? This Sunday?
Thursday, the 4th of September is opening day. It's a Thursday night game.
One day after we're on 92.9 FM Boston.
Nice.
That's right. That's right. Wednesday, September 3rd, we're on 92.9 Boston. But the very next day, the NFL season starts, and so do we. So does the Bloomberg fantasy.
Is there a function for this so that we can track this?
There isn't. That's a good. You know what? We'll see if your viewers, if your audience want a regular update. But
this is going to keep Bloomberg Business and Sports busy. It's a huge deal.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, letting in private equity. I mean, Randall Williams has been all over this. Bloomberg News reporter. He runs our sports content. He has been all over this. He's been talking to owners and buyers and private equity firms for the better part of the last year and a half.
It will go over to other sports like NHL?
It already has. Yeah. The ones that aren't allowed yet. I mean, it's just a matter of time. But this was the big one. I mean, now that the NFL's let private equity in, the bar's been set.
Damien Cesar, thank you so much. Terrific brief. Bloomberg Business Sports. Scarlett Fu leading that coverage with one D Cesar and M Barr when they're on speaking terms. That's a lot of value out there as well. Paul, I got to go back to the 2-year yield, 3.86% and 3 basis points. And clearly what we heard from McKee and others is, this is just the detritus off of Jackson Hole.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, again, you didn't need a Michael Barr to tell you what Fed Chairman Jay Powell really is thinking about in terms of where he wants rates to go. He was very clear in his words. And so now it's just a question of by how much and over what time frame.
Obligatory Nvidia moment.
Yeah.
Okay, take 2 standard deviations, daily chart. Nvidia, at 128, it can go up $10 to 137, 138 is the peak of 2 standard deviations. Are you ready for this?
Yep.
They can decline 25% and still be within 2 standard deviations. I've never said that, folks. I can assure you, I have never said that in umpteen decades of doing this. That's the rocket ship that Nvidia
Stocks trading pretty much unchanged here in the pre-market, but boy, this is going to be a really important print, as they always are for this company.
This afternoon, when Ed Ludlow's on, stock goes 128 to 96.
Oh boy!
Ludlow can say, "Well, we're still within the envelope."
Right, still within the envelope. Nothing to fear here.
Important conversation. Ed Ludlow, hugely informed on this, far better than I will ever be. We're doing classic rock now to September 4th. In celebration of 99.1 Washington, And joining us in 92.9 FM Boston, of course, Fleetwood Mac. Why not?
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Lisa Mateo, out. Harbor Island, Bahamas, living large.
Good.
And the weather there's, I think it's nice here. It's like 98 today or something.
And you get that nice breeze down there.
Well, what's the beach look like? I mean, it looks
awesome.
Awesome.
She's with the fam.
Is your water like 90 degrees like Florida?
No, but it is.
Oh, it was chilly. I went in the other day and it was still chilly. You get a shock when you jump in.
They said it was 72. I walked back to the lifeguard. I said, dude, it's like 67 at best.
Yeah, they do that. Yeah.
False advertising.
Good morning across the nation, around the world. We say special good morning to Melbourne, Australia. We're looking at YouTube in the evening on the Pacific Rim, thunderstruck by the response that we're getting. We could keep track of that somehow. I don't know how they do that, but YouTube building every day for us. Subscribe to the Bloomberg podcast website out on YouTube. It's there. I can see it right now on my cell phone with a great live chat. Live chat fired up. They don't consider Fleetwood Mac Don't Stop classic rock.
I do.
I agree.
I don't. I'm a huge Fleetwood Mac. The best concert I saw relative to my expectations was Fleetwood Mac.
I agree.
I went in with it relatively high, but I came out saying, oh my God, every single person in that band is a world-class musician.
I saw them when no one knew who they were with the new Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham. They opened for Loggins and Messina, and they stole the show.
Yeah, I can
They
imagine.
literally stole the show. It's interesting to see. John Tucker didn't think we'd say this today. From our Interactive Broker Studios, let's save the show with John Tucker.
You always surprise me. Light trading. Futures little change as investors eagerly anticipate the earnings report from, chip maker Nvidia after the close of regular trading today. Nordstrom surpassing Wall Street profit expectations, better than expected sales, also raising its per-share profit guidance and said it planned to open another 21 stores, but pre-market shares, they're down about 1%. Another retailer, Kohl's, shares rising 2% after the retailer raising its full-year forecast for earnings per share and operating margin, despite lowering its sales outlook. Right now, a whole lot of nothing. Dow futures 22 points lower. The S&P 500 E-mini futures, they're down 2, and the NASDAQ futures right now, they are 9 points lower. 2-year yield 386. The 10-year yield, a little change there at 382. Let's do Brent. That is down close to 1%. 78.81 a barrel. NYMEX crude 74.77 a barrel. 315 on the way in per gallon at the Wawa.
Route 36 Wawa in New Jersey. Very
Yeah.
good.
So it's, it's doable.
And psychologically, 299 is a huge number, isn't it? If we really
It's
get there.
heading in the right direction.
John Tucker, thank you so much. Kit Jukes is so ubiquitous on Wall Street, we take for granted his esteemed resume. It's shocking how he is a gentleman of Europe and of the world of economics and foreign exchange. He is with Societe Generale and joins us this morning. Kit, I want to play off the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Capuano of Marriott. He made clear in his conversation with us that there's a complete underestimation of the boom of Southern Europe. You've got a chalet in Spain, and from Lisbon over to Greece and beyond, is there a boom economy that we underestimate?
There is a boom economy. I mean, in Europe, Spain is the standout economy in Europe. The summer in Spain is what Spain's about. You need to plan your restaurant reservations and your plans right the way across that country at the moment. So we're still in that piece where people didn't enjoy being stuck in, and they're still doing it. But Spain more than anywhere else, Italy clearly doing quite a lot of good things. But yes, I would not underestimate that we are not quite yet done with the tourism boom. That's probably universal.
Is ugly Americans, do we underestimate the resiliency of Europe? One C. Lagarde has personally lectured me on this. Do we underestimate the dynamism of Europe?
I think Americans understand some bits about it. Europe is growing, it's resolute, it's resilient in the sense that it tends to avoid significant recessions. It's depressing in the sense that it suffers from what we might as well call excess savings on a permanent basis, hence the current account surplus, hence the capital flowing out of Europe into U.S. asset markets. So those things frustrate me because the unemployment rates are a bit too high for comfort. And but yes, you can say that there's resilience if you like. It keeps trundling on in its own good way, but it doesn't grow fast enough. We should aspire to more.
So, Kit, Tom Keene is planning his fall European tour. What can you tell him about the euro dollar right here?
Well, the euro dollar is, it's got not a lot of homegrown strength to it. The German economy is still vulnerable. So you can see even in the last 2 months when the dollar's been under pressure, the euro has underperformed the British pound, doing better as an economy. The euro has underperformed the Swiss franc. Money's been flowing into that. It's up against the dollar almost by default. It is going up against the dollar again because if Europeans or anybody else wants to bring money home, having been overinvested in the United States for the last 2 years, if they think, okay, the economy's slowing, the rates are coming down, I should bring some cash home. If that happens, the euro will benefit from that as well.
Kit, we spent a lot of today on foreign exchange. I want to bring it back to the U.S. dollar. You've been brilliant on this over the years through every crisis and thick and thin. Has the dollar broken, or can Kit Juke still publish of a resilient U.S. dollar?
It's still resilient. I mean, but it's, we have to start off by saying the dollar today is still very strong and very expensive. It's gone up a long way. One of the things that's puzzled me over the years, and I started doing this in 1984, I watched the dollar have its big first huge climb into 85 ahead of the Plaza Accord and give all of those gains back without a recession between then and 87. We did the same thing in the Great Moderation. It went shooting up from 1995 all the way up until 2001. By 2004, it had given it all back. Barely a recession, a lot of rate cuts, but not much of a recession. And there's part of me that says the reason for that isn't that the U.S. economy isn't extraordinarily resilient and that U.S. assets aren't wonderful and Americans aren't great people or any of that. It's that so much money gets sucked into the dollar when it's really going that in the end, when it comes out, the dollar weakens more than we think it does. And it's not a bad thing. That then causes problems for the rest of the world's central banks because a weak dollar means their currencies are strong, their exports are struggling, and they all have to buy dollars to boost their foreign exchange reserves. So that's the way the dollar could fall significantly from here. Not because the U.S. economy has a deep recession, but because there's enough money that's flowed in that if we take some of the chips off the table and bring them back home, the dollar can go down a fair way.
Kit, what's happening over with our friends in Japan, the Bank of Japan? Talk to us about the yen.
Well, they would like everything to calm down for a little bit, but they sound very committed still to monetary policy normalization. If they're going to normalize monetary policy and raise rates while all of the rest of us are cutting rates, they're going to get a stronger currency. The carry trade in the futures market, which you can see from the CFTC data, was washed out incredibly quickly. The carry trade from the longer in term investments, which is not just carry, it's right. Japanese people looking at the returns available domestically and saying, hey, the ones I get are bigger in America, thanks. That flow of money coming back, that's still got some legs to go for it. You got to remember, when they measure purchasing power parity, in other words, making the cost of just a basket of goods the same in all countries, dollar yen's fair value on that oversimplistic measure, mid-90s.
Thank you so much. You got to leave it there. Kit Jukes, you got breaking news, have to run. Let's do this again soon. Kit Jukes, it's SocGen. SMCI is super micro, and the answer is some difficult news has come out. Let's review, Paul, before you give us the news. Hindenburg, which is a short shop, Hindenburg Research, they had a short on micro. JP Morgan came out at 6:07-ish this morning. This off fly. JP Morgan keeps an overweight rating on super micro after Hindenburg Research released a short report. It's down from the peak, way up from where it was 2 years ago, and now breaking news.
Yeah, Tom, it's just crossing the Bloomberg terminal here. A super microcomputer to delay Form 10K filing for fiscal year 2024. The stock's off about 9 or 10% on this news here, pre-market trading. And as you mentioned, back in recent today, super microcomputer shares fell on Tuesday after Hindenburg Research said it's short the maker of server equipment, which became a tech market darling as a major beneficiary of the boom in artificial intelligence. So Hindenburg was out in front of that. Yeah. Today we get the 10K news. Obviously something going on there, but it had been one of those stocks that had an extraordinary rise here, starting the beginning of the year, reaching a peak of sitting here, 1,190, something like that. And here we are at 547. We're close.
Brody Ford yesterday, writing with Ryan Vestalika for Bloomberg, and the quote from Supermicro. Let me read this verbatim. A spokesperson for Supermicro said the company, quote, does not comment on rumors and speculation, unquote. And here we are, I'm going to say less than 12 hours later, maybe less than 18 hours later, with some really difficult accounting news from Supermicro. Our tech team will have much more on that, I'm sure. Ed Ludlow will have more on that on Bloomberg Technology as well. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Vice President Kamala Harris and running mate Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will take part in their first joint interview. It will be held tomorrow night on CNN. We get more with Bloomberg's Bill Ferries.
It has been out there for a while that she hasn't been doing these. She hasn't been doing interviews. She and Tim Walz will sit down on Thursday on CNN, and that really will be the first chance to have like a solid sit-down interview. So it'll be interesting to see that. I couldn't explain why she's waited this long. It's obviously a very abbreviated campaign, so I don't think this is going to be the last of it. And we have the debate we think will be happening on September 10th, so just in about 2 weeks. But this will be the first formal sit-down since Kamala Harris was I guess, nominated by President Biden to be his successor there at the end of July.
Bloomberg's Bill Ferries. Republican vice presidential candidate and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance was out on the campaign trail yesterday in Michigan. At a rally in Big Rapids, Vance outlined a top priority for him and his boss, Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris wants to open the border. On day one, Donald Trump is going to close the southern border, and his message to every illegal immigrant is pack your bags because you're going home.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Blue button, Detroit Lions, a blue button. Damien Sessa are loaded up with the Detroit Lions and their rotisserie.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to you. I was out west, then you were at the Open.
Yep.
And I don't think I've talked to you about Bronfman exiting the Paramount transaction. So why did he do it? Was he just trying to mess with people's brains, or is there a backstory here you can glean?
I've not heard of a backstory, but you know the serious people I talked to in the media space never took him seriously. Just as a credible bidder, there's no real visibility on financing, any strategic value he could bring to the company. So it wasn't. Again, the bankers and folks in the media industry that I had talked to never really thought it was credible. So you're left with, and I mean that, left with Skydance and that transaction, and that looks like that can proceed.
Right. Supermicro, SMCI. Wow. Did you hear the silence in the control room?
Yeah.
They're all, they get their laptops out
Exactly.
there on Robinhood working this puppy.
Working this thing.
547, now 491. It's been flighty to say the least. We'll continue to cover this. And you're lucky in the 10 o'clock hour you got Mike Regan with you.
Sure.
To really dive into this.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
good. The VIX 15.65, futures at -6, Bloomberg's surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg Newsroom, with this Bloomberg Business Flash. As we look at futures right now that indicate a lower to mixed to open on Wall Street. Dow futures right now down 22 points. The S&P E-mini futures 6 points lower than Nasdaq futures right now. They are 40 points lower. Most active in the pre-market, of course, Nvidia down about 0.3% ahead of its earnings after the close of regular trading today. And just to recap for you, in the pre-market shares of Supermicro Computer, those shares right now down 10%. The company says it expects it will not timely file its annual report. That's Form 10K. As we look at oil, Brent crude is down 0.8%, 78.90 a barrel. NYMEX crude down 63 cents a barrel, 74.90 right now. And as far as treasuries, the 2-year yield unchanged, 3.85. The 10-year right now also unchanged. That is at 3.82. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
You got to get an audible question here, John Tucker. We do this with Ivan Feinseth, perfectly timed, senior partner, grizzled veteran. First heard of him at Bear Stearns years ago. Tigress Financial Partners. Ivan, I got to go to SMCI. Hindenburg puts out a short report of his stock. 24 hours later, the company comes out with, oops, the 10K doesn't look good. What does the Feinseth radar say about SMCI going from Hindenburg tank to, oops, the 10K doesn't work?
Well, not good, but they recently switched in 23. They switched to Deloitte & Touche, so I guess they're going through the filings again to make sure that there are no issues. I mean, Hindenburg does have a short position in the stock, and then they do publish research that recommends that shorting the stock based on accounting irregularities. So, I mean, it is Hindenburg's work has been questionable. However, I do like Supermicro. It is part of the AI play. So I right now feel this weakness is a buying opportunity. And they are a tremendous partner with Nvidia, so to manage outsourced data centers. So hopefully there are no irregularities, and we look back and this will have been a buying opportunity.
You've been doing this forever, and you've got a wonderful skepticism built into your securities analysis. I got 66 buys, 8 holds, no sells on the juggernaut known as Nvidia. What does the Ivan radar say when you see everybody on board?
Well, I think back in the olden days, they used to view a lot of buy ratings as being a contrarian indicator. Yet it has not been the case with Nvidia. You can see on Bloomberg that my split adjusted initial buy rating going back, I think, to 2015 is now like 50 cents. But Nvidia is at the core of this process of being able, originally they were able to take digital information and turn it into visual information at a faster level through their graphics processors. And now they are taking visual information and turning it into digital information, which is really the driver of this whole AI large language or machine learning process. I mean, that our brains are analog computers that see things and process visually and based on an analog basis. And to give you an example, a computer learning the difference between a cat and a dog is a visual process. And that's what NVIDIA is enabling these computers to do as we adopt AI to handle data processing.
So in terms of what NVIDIA needs to do today after the close, Ivan, I guess that has to be another beat and raise, or the stock's in trouble? How do you think
absolutely. Well, first of all, there's expectations that the revenue will be up 70 to 80% year over year, and that earnings will be up almost 100%, and that they will guide higher again for the next quarter. And more importantly, there's been this controversy around whether the next generation processor, the Blackwell, will be delayed or not, which is kind of funny because they said it's coming and they never gave a specific date. So I don't know if it's delayed if you don't really have a specific date, but it will be, there'll be a focus on a discussion of when the Blackwell processor will start to ship. And they already have the next generation Rubin processor that they announced in March of this year that will come out next year. So they continue to make faster and more powerful processor, and combining now GPU and CPUs. So the Rubin processor is a major leap forward, and they continue to drive this whole process.
Ivan, do you believe, as others have said to us, that basically Nvidia says you're not going to get the Rubin or the Blackwell unless you buy the present chip, and that they're basically almost creating a luxury stock scarcity by saying you don't get the 2026 chip unless you load the boat with a 2024 chip? Is there veracity to that?
Well, they control the market, and there is a huge demand for processors. Even the CEO of Supermicro, who's friends with Jensen Huang, continues to ask him for more and more chips. You have Mark Zuckerberg at Meta asking for more and more processors. There's huge demand, and the data centers are being built based on each level of processor while you're building out the current processor based on the Hopper, which is the current processor. Then it'll be followed by the Blackwell. And NVIDIA has to, like any company, take care of their best customers first.
Hey, Ivan, a very intelligent investor asked me earlier this morning, why aren't some of these other chip companies more competitive with NVIDIA? Why does NVIDIA have such a strong position in this part of the market?
Because they're multiple steps ahead of everybody else. And, the quote, while everybody's playing checkers, Jensen Huang is playing 3D chess. So they pioneered the graphics processor and invented it, from the beginning, have pioneered it and continue to leapfrog and be just way ahead of anybody else. So, and if your business is dependent on this, like the hyperscalers and the cloud service providers businesses are, you want to go with the best, the most reliable, the fastest. And even Jensen Huang has said, the more you spend, the more you save. So it also has the cost in processing does present a savings. So that is a factor there too.
Ivan, thank you so much. I really appreciate the comments on SMCI as the news breaks of questions over their 10K filing, and Mr. Feinseth mentioning Deloitte Touche involved there as well. Ivan, don't be a stranger. Thank you. With Tigress, just incredibly well timed. Sometimes, people go, how do you plan this? We just stumble into good fortune.
Exactly.
Oh, SMC's blowing up. There's a red headline across the Bloomberg terminal. Get Feinseth.
And he's
there.
No,
folks, he's just there.
He's there, exactly. Looking at Supermicrocomputer, Tom, here in the pre-market, off about just almost 10% here. And it's had the Hindenburg research report has really pushed it down from its recent highs.
One of the joys I have in all this is even if I studied it for like Labor Day weekend, I'm going to really read about NVIDIA. It's like this is, you just got to rely on pros and go with who.
And we've got them here, either internally or externally.
Internally or externally. We'll continue to bring those debates. We see our cameras are all lined up here. We're like 3-4 guests ahead. I can see Michael Regan up in the food court now, getting ready to work with Paul Sweeney here in 35 minutes. And Emily Roland's like, she's coming up next with John Hancock. Ivan's talking about NVIDIA and SMCI. Emily, you can tell her she's day trading it.
Yes, exactly.
She's right off. She's got the laptop open in Boston, and she's day trading what's coming up. We'll get to Emily Roland here on the broader market. She has been dead on about buy U.S., buy large caps, and the broadening of the market. They're critical conversation for your Labor Day weekend. Futures negative 6 of VIX, 15.65 on YouTube. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom, the opening bell report, waiting for the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Of course, Nvidia remains the story of the week as we wait for earnings after the close, and Supermicrocomputer delaying its 10K regulatory filing, as you heard right here, breaking that news on Bloomberg. And a raft of retail earnings, Kohl's raising as a full-year forecast for earnings per share and operating margin. Nordstrom improving its comp sales forecast for the year, issuing a stronger than expected adjusted earnings per share outlook. And right out of the gate, S&P 500 down just a point, 56.24 in the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average unchanged right now. The Nasdaq 100 4 points lower. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. And that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. This is really well timed. New Year's for the business is, well, it used to be the Wednesday after Labor Day.
Yeah.
And I'd say, Paul's left for the last decade, it's sort of a September 15th-ish.
Yeah. After Labor Day, get back
you
to
know,
it.
new resolution, what are you going to do in the autumn and all that? And part of it is either pro or sitting at home, sitting on the deck Labor Day with a can of Budweiser in your hands saying, what's our belief? Emily Roland joins from the John Hancock Company with the clarity of her belief. Emily, you have nailed Buy American, Buy Mid-Cap. Do you still believe that?
Yeah, we do, Tom. And the way we think about this is you want to identify where are the best earnings trends and where are the best economic trends. It's as simple as that. A lot of people will tell you that valuations are the key input. For us, we want to look at the denominator of the PE ratio as the key here. And the U.S. has simply been able to generate better earnings results. Just this year, we're looking at about 11% in the U.S. versus about half that in international markets. High quality stocks, guess where you find those? In the United States. Those are ones with great balance sheets. They've got tons of cash. They're going to do a better job defending their margins in an environment where the late cycle dynamics continue to play out.
Very quickly, our SMCI opening here at 9:32, Paul. I'm going to go back 4 days before the Hindenburg news, down 21% from where it was August 23 into a Friday of last week. Right now, 471, worse than it was pricing before the market opened.
Absolutely. Tom, all right, thank you for that. Emily, we just finishing up earnings period here. What did you take away from the earnings cycle and maybe the guidance that we saw from some of these companies?
Yeah, earnings this quarter, of course, much better than expected. Of course, we have a behemoth after the close today, which is going to be highly influential. Hard to forget that that's coming later on today, but better than expected. Technology in particular saw about double the earnings growth as the broad market. So I think, there's so many smoking guns out there that investors are pointing to as negatives. You look at some of the economic data that's coming in worse than expected. You look at especially the labor market data, which is showing some cracks. Earnings is not one of them. The earnings backdrop has been robust. And again, that's a key reason that we've continued to emphasize U.S. equities given those positive earnings trends.
So we heard from the Fed chairman on Friday pretty clearly looking to cut rates there, assuming that actually takes place here, maybe beginning in September. What sectors screen well for you in a market where, earnings, the rates seem to be coming down?
Yeah, I think, the Jackson Hole speech, by the way, was pretty interesting. We saw exactly what was expected. Powell obviously confirmed that cuts are coming. But I always watch the market reaction. And, we saw bonds move a little bit. Market expectations of a rate cut didn't change really. 100 basis points penciled in for this year. But we saw huge moves in equities and in currencies with the dollar plunging to near 2-year lows. So I think it was a big sort of sentiment driven move there as nothing to me really seemed to change in terms of the expectation. So I think that was notable. In terms of sectors and parts of the market that we think should do well, it's sort of the opposite of the market reaction that we've seen with areas like small cap value stocks doing the best since that day. Areas like international value stocks which have benefited from that weaker dollar, we actually think that the Fed is probably going to be cutting because something's wrong. Maybe it's as simple as margins are getting compressed and the unemployment rate's going up. Growth is slowly slowing. So in that case, cyclical assets wouldn't be rewarded. This is like the secret life of asset allocators and the way that we think about these cross asset moves. It doesn't really make sense. You have this odd kind of partnership right now of long dated treasuries and gold in international value and small cap stocks being the best performing things out there. It actually doesn't really make a ton of sense when you open up your textbooks.
Emily Roland, stay with us. Don't go away. We've got to follow SMCI, where they're having 10K issues. Thank you, Ivan Feinseth, for perspective here moments ago. Opening, can't find a bid. It was a 550. And it's now 459, 459 off of where it was 614 a couple days ago. Before the Hindenburg short report, it is down 25%. Still can't find a bid, 456 right now. Emily Roland, when we look at the market, and this is something you can do from old John Hancock or new John Hancock in Boston, you can say, when does the money move? Are we getting near a yield? As we see 30-year mortgage down, are we getting near a cash equivalent out 3 months or 2 years where we see money supporting equities?
Yeah, I think we're there right now. One of the, we think about these sort of timely indicators in the markets that we watch, and right now, to us, it's really about initial jobless claims and high yield bond spreads. Initial claims, they picked up a little bit last week. They're still in this range of 200 to 260,000. High yield bond spreads extremely tame at about 310 basis points over treasuries. That's well below the average over the last 20 years of 500 basis points. So I think until you see movement on that front, I think markets are going to continue to reward equities. We want to think about, again, leaning into higher quality stocks, maybe sprinkling in some more defensive equities. But now is the time to think about leaning into high quality bonds, because once those two things happen, spreads blow out and initial claims rise, it's often too late to capture the income that's available in bonds. So you probably remember, down the street from John Hancock, John F. Kennedy once said that the time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. And we think this is the time to think about emphasizing bonds, before it's too late to get these great yields.
She's going to quote Ted Williams next time she's on.
Exactly. So, Emily, again, we're in the fixed income space. You could sit there at a treasury 2 years, get 3.87%. It's not where we were just a little while ago, north of 4%, but still decent. Or do I take credit risk? How much credit risk should I be taking here?
Yeah, so our favorite areas in terms of, the risk return trade-off right now are investment grade corporate bonds, which are yielding, 4 to 5%. And I'm talking about like a single A investment grade corporate bond. That's very elevated versus history. We like areas like agency mortgage-backed securities, which are also, showing solid fundamentals and good valuations there. Even treasuries. High yield's tricky. When you go down the credit spectrum right now with spreads as contained, as tight as they are, historically, when spreads have been at this level of around 300 basis points, your 12-month forward-looking return is around 0 to 1%, with a range of positive 10% to negative 10%. To us, the risks aren't worth it there. And by the way, you don't even need to go down the credit spectrum in order to generate an elevated yield right now, which we think is pretty exciting.
Emily, thank you so much. Emily Roland with an important update, Co-Chief Investment Strategist, John Hancock. Really can't, the value, whether you agree or disagree, the value of these conversations gives perspective into the great adjustment known as September. On SMCI, 450 just breaking. I have a 449 handle on SMCI, and from the pre-Hindenburg short, I'm taking this back to August 23rd, Friday. Down 26.6% off of where we closed out on.
And from Friday. The recent highs earlier in the year, down 60% from the recent highs. So just extraordinary. And I have to be honest, before this stock took off, I'd never heard of the company. And it's sitting here with a 30 billion market cap, and it's just one of those tech companies that kind of flew under the screen until it got tabbed as an AI play.
But we're not tech savvy like John Tucker.
No, of course not.
It was the best performing stock of the S&P 500 year to date for a very long time.
Yes.
Are you getting a new iPhone? Are you finally trading in the one that Michael Douglas used in
There
that
is
movie
absolutely
years ago?
nothing wrong. I don't know what brand this is, and I think I'm up to 2.5K.
Yeah.
Well,
It works just fine.
I was just informed by the Bloomberg tech people that my phone will no longer be supported. That's
So you
yet
can't
another
get-
reason I have to upgrade.
Oh, okay. All
They're
right.
saying it's so old it won't support the Bloomberg.
We'll have to see. The Dow, negative 34. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Former President Donald Trump is facing a new federal indictment related to allegations he tried to illegally interfere with the last election. The revised charging document comes in light of the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision granting presidents immunity for official acts. Donald Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, spoke in Nashville yesterday about the new federal indictment.
It looks like Jack Smith doing more of what he does, which is filing these absurd lawsuits in an effort to influence the election.
Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris and running mate Tim Walz will give their first joint interview to CNN tomorrow night at the end of a 2-day bus tour of Georgia. Harris has been under Republican pressure to do unscripted events since she launched her campaign more than a month ago. Bloomberg's Laura Davison has more from Washington.
This is pretty big. This will be among one of the larger audiences that she's had since becoming the nominee. Probably it won't rise to the level of her DNC acceptance speech last week, but it'll be a pretty big audience, and this will get clipped and moved around social media and the internet. So people will be seeing this, particularly if there is a large gaffe.
Bloomberg's Laura Davison reports that appearance is set for tomorrow night at 9 Wall Street time on CNN. As a heat wave stretched into a second day this week, residents in more than a half a dozen states are looking for ways to beat the heat amid hot temperatures approaching triple digits. The National Weather Service has issued excessive heat warnings and advisories in large patches of Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And just weeks after hosting the Olympics, the Summer of Sports in Paris begins its final chapter with the opening ceremony of the Paralympic Games. More than 4,000 athletes with physical, visual, and intellectual impairments will compete in 22 sports over the next 11 days. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. And SMCI down $94. I'm looking for the price.
453.
500 something, and we're now down to 452 with a low of 440. Boy. We sort of found a bid, but I really don't want to say so. And if I give it a weekly chart to put, Paul, you mentioned the history of this thing, a moonshot.
Yeah.
For years, John Tucker mentioning it's up to 1,200, and then sort of a churn here at 800, 900. And the support, I guess, is 300.
Yeah.
And we're at 454 now.
Yep.
Don't point me. I'm making that up, folks, over my honeydeuce that Paul brought me from the Open. But, the answer, Paul, is it's certainly broken recent support to be collegial.
Yes. I mean, it is well below the 50 and 200 moving day average for those chartists. And you pull up the RSI function, relative strength. It's right down at the bottom of support here. So if it were to break kind of really almost right where we are here, then it could go further.
Lawrence McDonald tweeting out, respected a guy, great author and all that. He says it's Nvidia's third largest customer. Did they comment on it today? I don't know. Yeah. Did they talk about it with Ed Ludlow in the 6 o'clock hour? I don't know.
We'll see.
All of a sudden, that interview is more
timely. You're exactly right. This is an important day for global technology.
And that's the way Ludlow rolls. It's 3 o'clock Pacific time. I mean, he's
exactly.
Get in before noon.
It comes in with his Tesla, self-driving Tesla.
It does. It's never. It parks itself. Futures, the Dow rather open. The Dow negative 23, SPX negative 3, the VIX 15.65. We're on YouTube in Boston, September 3rd, 92.9 FM.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The major stock averages mixed to unchanged right now ahead of the earnings results from Nvidia. Let's actually start off with the worst performing stock of the S&P 500. Again, super microcomputer down over 18%, delaying its annual financial disclosures. And this follows yesterday's news that the short seller Hindenburg Research releasing a critical report alleging glaring accounting red flags. Berkshire Hathaway shares on the move ahead of Warren Buffett's birthday. No connection here. The company topping $1 trillion in market value for the first time. Kohl's raising its full-year profit outlook. The retailer trimming expenses, reducing inventory levels amid a pullback from consumers. Kohl's shares right now up 3.7%. You also had results from Abercrombie & Fitch beating analyst sales expectations for the sixth consecutive quarter. Not enough, though, to impress investors. Those shares, they were lower in the early going. Right now, the S&P 500 down 6, the Dow down 13, the NASDAQ 100, 76 points lower. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John, thanks for mentioning Berkshire. Paul, 20 years, just took, 2004.
Yeah.
Up 657%, up 10.7% per year.
Solid.
He gets a lot of Apple cred, but it was legitimately diversified.
Yeah.
With some successes, some failures like anybody else. But I'm sorry, 10.7% over 20 years gets it done.
Yeah, and I think just the question investors today have is simply, what do you do with all that cash on your balance sheet?
Yeah. Joining us right now, this is a different conversation. Tina Bowles-Williams joins us, CEO of Exponents. And what's wonderful about Tina is she's got legitimate public investment cred, mostly out of Philadelphia and all. Tina, I've been dying to ask you this question for like 3 days. I believe there's a collapse in real estate in cities. I don't know which ones. I don't have Philadelphia memorized, but this building, that building, the other, cratering. Is that going to affect the taxation and the pensions of public entities across this nation?
Wow. Look, it's the short answer is yes. I mean, and in Philadelphia in particular, our mayor has started, along with some other companies, Comcast, etc., required workers to come back 5 days for the work week. And we're seeing, actually, Philadelphia, I sit on the board of the business district here, and has, relative to other cities, has seen more healthy foot traffic than others. But yes, I mean, it will impact revenues, which ultimately impact pension fund contributions.
So from your perspective at Exponents Asset Management, does that impact the way you view the markets at all, given maybe some of the demographic changes we've seen?
So where that impacts our clients is cash becomes, particularly for some of the northeastern cities, New York City, certainly Philadelphia, they have more retirees than they have active participants, which means they need to pay healthy benefits checks every month. And in an environment in which liquidity has become more dear,
right.
It means that you have to rethink asset allocation strategies, for example, in private markets, etc.
Well, that's the heart of the matter, Tina. One final question. We've got to go to breaking news. But, Tina, what is so important, I think, is the certitude of a 60-40 portfolio. And granted, within public pensions, maybe it's a little more bond-oriented. In 5 years or in 10 years, Are we still going to see the structure of public pension funds that we've known for generations?
So public pension funds have actually moved substantially away from the 60-40 model. I would say their public equity allocation is more like 30 to 40%, with the balance being in private markets, debt or equity. What is different and refreshingly different is that bonds are once again going to become a diversifier for the equity book as inflation, becomes more controlled. And so that has been an asset allocation challenge for not only public pension funds, but for model-driven, defined benefit plans.
Tina,
so,
yeah. Tina, thank you so much. We got to go to breaking news, but we greatly appreciate it this morning with exponents. Tina Biles Williams, our Chief Executive Officer from Philadelphia. Paul, we don't have a bid yet on SMCI. We came out of the news an hour ago with a headline of challenges of 10K. I'm sorry, I don't have the headline in front of me because I'm watching a price movement. But to go back to last week, I've got an over $600 pricing. And with the short off Hindenburg, I'm down to maybe 575, and then a free fall from 550, and we're moments ago a new low of 432, and that's way below where we were at 929, Paul.
We're 20% below where we were at 929, Tom. So a tremendous 2 days here for super microcomputer with the Hindenburg report yesterday, and then with the announcement today that they're going to delay the filing of their 10K. As John Tucker reported earlier, there was a change in auditors, or as Adam Feinseth mentioned earlier, a change in auditors. So that could have something to do with it, but the timing is just amazing here for what was, as John Tucker was reporting, certain point this year, the best performing stock out there. So it was really called out as one of the AI plays out there, AI winners, and that very well may be certainly the case from a fundamental perspective, but there's some issues around this company.
They're
right
all
here.
different, and so much of it is, I don't mean to use the word retail, but it has that feeling of when you go to the SMCI website, they're selling stuff.
Yeah.
We're not creating Chat GPT here.
No.
So I have trouble in the media, folks, where everybody bundles AI together into one conversation.
Yep. I mean, Woo Jin Ho, just in some recent Bloomberg News reporting, Woo Jin Ho, an analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, wrote that Hindenburg's report could raise greater scrutiny on the server equipment makers' accounting practices and customer transactions. He says that while the concerns that Hindenburg raised aren't new, they might intensify the spotlight on client relationships, especially given heightened U.S. scrutiny of AI system sales to sanctioned countries and companies.
Interesting to see. We will continue to follow that story to the 10 o'clock hour. Advantaged to have Michael Regan with us today, driving all of our equity coverage off the desk. Paul Sweeney and Mike Regan, I believe, scheduled for 10 a.m., which works. Again, a little bit of tech weakness, but once again, the Dow green.
The Dow
Berkshire
Green,
Hathaway green.
Exactly, $1 trillion in market capitalization for Berkshire Hathaway for the first time.
Right.
Nvidia, Tom, again, that'll be the news after the close, and Carol Master and Tim Stenovic, they'll be breaking that news as it happens after the close here on Bloomberg Radio. The stock's down about 1.4% here in the early trading.
And Carol and Tim, they're going to the U.S. Do they wear tennis whites?
I think they do. They look solid.
Hey, I got a question.
Yes.
When you were there yesterday, how rowdy was the crowd?
Not rowdy, because it was a day. Then the day crowd leaves, and the night crowd comes in.
And those are two different crowds.
Two different gigs. When the sun goes down, it can get pretty rowdy in there. But most of the players say they like it. Some people, they don't like it, but a lot of players say it's really the most energetic environment they play in all year, and it's like no other environment anywhere. So and the fans are huge, and the facilities get bigger, the stadiums get bigger. It really is amazing what they're doing.
Lots going on. We got to play Led Zeppelin every day in Boston, 92.9 FM, September 3rd. Liz Ann Saunders called up and said, Tom, classic rock, just play Zeppelin 24/7. Good morning.